Recording in progress. Thank you, Paul. Finally, if you have any technical issues during the meeting, we have set up 2 dedicated tech support phone numbers for attendees that you should be able to see in the chat box in a minute. I'm going to add those. Those lines will remain open during this meeting. With all these details now out of the way, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Rabbi John Spira-Savett.
Thank you, Don, and welcome. Good morning, everybody. And for those who are just coming out of the fast day, a Shana Tova and a Shavua Tov, a good week, and may it be a better year. I don't want to use up any extra time here with preliminaries. Don has gone over the logistics of this. I am truly the moderator here, just to help keep things moving along and to pass along your questions, for the most part, to our candidates after they have a chance to make their own remarks. And the way that you can do that is, and the only way you can do that is to chat them privately to me in the chat. And so these questions will be your questions. If there is room for, or if I choose here and there to put in a question that's mine, I will identify it as my question. And without further ado, I want to welcome our first candidate, Mayor Joyce Craig, who is the Democratic nominee for governor of New Hampshire. Welcome, Mayor Craig. And thank you for being here. And as I say, this is, though I'm moderating, this isn't a conversation per se between you and me. You are addressing an audience of members of the community who are very engaged and knowledgeable. So I hope you will use that as a cue to jump, into as much media as possible. We'd love to give you about up to 15 minutes to say whatever you would like, and then I'll feed along some of the questions.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here and start the day with all of you. We live in a state that is brimming with potential, and I'm running for governor to ensure that we strengthen our local cities and towns and make sure that residents across New Hampshire have the opportunity to succeed. For the last 6 years, I had the opportunity to serve as mayor or the chief executive for the city of Manchester. And when you think about local government throughout our state, it's very different. In Manchester, we didn't have a city manager. So it was my job to put forward the budget of $400 million every year. I negotiated contracts, managed all of the city departments, and was chairman of both the school board and the board of mayor and aldermen. Being a chief executive is all about setting priorities, building trust, and getting things done. And as mayor, I set the vision for our city and worked hard every single day to build a stronger community. I'm proud to say that I'm a 4th-generation resident of this state. Grew up in a blue-collar household. My dad was an IBEW 490 electrician. And when I think about my childhood, I know I was so fortunate to grow up in this beautiful state with 2 loving parents. But it wasn't always easy for us. There was a time when my dad actually had to move to Wisconsin for over a year to work because there were no local jobs available to him. And that feeling of my father having to leave our family has stayed with me. And it's why I have always focused on creating good paying jobs and making sure that we are supporting hardworking families in our community. And I succeeded. I helped hundreds of small businesses open, brought in hundreds of millions of dollars for economic development. And today, Manchester has one of the hottest job markets in the entire country. And I'm always looking for ways to move our city and state forward for the future. As mayor, I took climate change and rising energy costs seriously. We built the largest municipal solar array in the entire state, saving our residents money. And because of that solar array and other initiatives we put in place, we were able to cut carbon emissions by 60%. Leadership matters, and we should be able to be doing this in communities throughout New Hampshire. So as governor, I'll put forward an energy policy that promotes renewable energy and sets clear goals on how to transition away from fossil fuel, because it's the right thing to do to preserve this amazing state that we live in and the smart thing to do to save our families money. And today, Manchester is home to an emerging biomanufacturing industry that will revolutionize healthcare as we know it. When I was mayor, my office led an effort to apply for a very competitive federal grant. And I'm pleased to say we're the only municipality in the entire country to win. So we have $44 million coming into Manchester to build out lab space. It's increasing access to affordable childcare, provide workforce development, and it's creating 7,000 new family-sustaining jobs. But that was just a start, because since then, both Nashua and Manchester have been deemed a tech hub and just recently received another $40 million to boost their local economies. I know how to get this done and believe strongly that we should be moving forward with opportunities like this in every corner of the state, and it's what I intend to do as governor. When you think about this significant growth, though, we have to be focused on a prepared workforce. And for me, that starts with quality public education. I first got involved in public service when I ran for school board. At the time, I had 3 young kids. Today, they're 27, 25, and 20, so it was a little bit ago. But I wanted to change the direction of Manchester public schools, and it is still what drives me today. I know that quality public education leads to thriving communities and creates opportunities for our kids and their futures. I'm proud to say my daughter, Sarah, is just started her 3rd year teaching at Hillside Middle School in Manchester. And my husband and I are tremendously proud to have a public school teacher in our family. I know how hard our educators work today, and I will always support our teachers, their students, and their families. And in Manchester, we made progress and improved student achievement, despite the downshifting from the state that's burdening all of our local communities, a dangerous voucher scheme that is siphoning millions of dollars away from our public schools, putting them toward private and religious schools, and an education commissioner who is doing everything in his power to dismantle public education. So as governor, I want to be clear that my priority will be to put public tax dollars toward our public schools. And on day 1, I'll be asking for Frank Edelblu's resignation. A critical way that we need to support families in our state is to ensure that they have a place to live, an affordable place to live. And I will tell you that in Manchester, this is something that we worked around the clock on. And I allocated over $30 million toward affordable housing initiatives. We now have over 2,000 homes and apartments in development. And this past December, we broke ground on one of the largest affordable housing developments in the entire state. Statewide projections are that we need 60,000 housing units by 2030. So we have no time to wait. We need to start building so that our young people, our seniors, and our hardworking families can afford to live in New Hampshire. I'm the only candidate who has the hands-on experience of getting this done. So I know what it takes to negotiate with developers, to incentivize affordable housing. And critical to all of this is working with our local communities to build the housing that meets your needs. And it's this hands-on experience that is absolutely critical to tackling this statewide challenge. And we need a governor who understands statewide challenges when it comes to homelessness, mental health, and substance use disorder. And again, this is something that in Manchester, we wrapped our arms around. 1, because it was the right thing to do, but secondly, because we got very little support from the state. So some things that we did in Manchester, we opened up the first city-run, city-funded shelter during the winter for fatality prevention a couple of years ago, and that shelter's still open today, and it's full. We opened up an engagement center. So many of our nonprofit partners were under one roof. So an individual could go in, take a shower, get a meal, and immediately be connected to services. And I got the National Alliance to End Homelessness to come into the city of Manchester and work with us. Their mission is to prevent and to end homelessness across our entire country. So they're working with the city of Manchester to make sure that our programs are best meeting the most vulnerable in our community. And I feel strongly, quite frankly, that they should be working at the state level with communities across New Hampshire who are struggling with this challenge. So since we started this work, we saw a 20% decrease in opioid overdoses and a 50% decrease in encampments. It's a start, but we can be doing much better with coordination from the state and partnership from the state, working with our local communities, and it's exactly what I intend to do. And I understand how the housing crisis is adding complexity onto these issues. And it's why I'm an advocate for a housing first model, supportive housing, because evidence shows that when we can put a roof over someone's head, we can stabilize them and then better address their underlying needs. And we need to do everything we can to keep our communities and our families safe. And I will tell you, this is one of the most daunting challenges that I took on when I became mayor. Because after over a decade of Republican mayors, our crime rates had hit historic highs. So I got to work right away and partnered with the Manchester Police Department, and we implemented things like community police officers, community health workers, answering calls to service that were nonviolent in nature. We hired more police officers, and they were patrolling the streets and building relationships with our community members. And we implemented the first gun violence prevention strategy the city has ever seen. And as a result, we saw an almost 40% decrease in violent crime. And we used data to drive our decisions. And it's the same approach that I would bring to the governor's office. So you're all here. You know there's a lot on the line this election. There are extreme threats on the LGBTQ community, on climate, on our democracy, and on access to abortion. And I want to be very clear, as state and national attacks and threats on reproductive freedom continue to increase, I will always fight for access to abortion and reproductive health care in New Hampshire. When I think about the Dobbs decision, I think about my two daughters and all of our daughters and granddaughters, and the fact that they have less control over their bodies than we did at their age. And that's wrong. I trust women to make their own healthcare decisions that should be between a woman and her doctor, and politicians play no role in that. And I will fight to ensure it stays that way. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. I look forward to the conversation that we're going to have now and answer your questions. I just want to mention that I have the executive experience. I understand the challenges that our local communities are facing and the opportunities that we can bring into the state to help lift up families. I also have a record of getting things done, and that's what we need in a governor today, a solution-oriented governor who will focus on making sure we are creating opportunities for residents across our state, and that's what I'll be doing. And I ask for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
So thank you for your question. Thank you. I'm sorry for your opening statement. And thank you for people are starting to put some questions into the chat. For those of you who've come in since we started, that's how you can submit questions to me that I can give to the mayor. And so the first question is, do you have a plan to help with the healthcare workforce?
Yes, and that's a great question. So what we're seeing in New Hampshire, as you know, is not being able to attract the healthcare doctors, nurses, and so forth that we need in our state. So we need to be partnering with the hospitals and making sure we're doing everything we can to encourage people to come here. You know, what I am hearing when I talk to medical professionals, though, in addition to that, is that restrictive things like an abortion ban are keeping medical professionals away from our state, and we need to consider that. We also need to I talked about housing. The lack of housing right now is causing issues with attracting people to New Hampshire, medical professionals to New Hampshire. We know that the Medicaid rates are low, and we need to be looking at that and doing everything we can. In the North Country, they don't have access to healthcare as much as we do in the southern tier of New Hampshire. they're actually sending medical professionals out to homes, like the community health workers that I talked about are an option in the interim before that we should be considering as well.
Do you have a plan? What ways could you encourage New Hampshire residents to buy and keep electric vehicles?
Yeah, one of the things is that so the federal government has given the state of New Hampshire money, a lot of money, to build EV charging stations. And that money has been stalled by the current administration in terms of getting out into our state. And so when you look at New England, New Hampshire is sort of, we don't have a lot of charging stations in New Hampshire. So as governor, one of the first things that I'm going to be doing is getting those funds out so we can build EV charging stations throughout our state because those are needed for individuals. But talking about the importance of climate and savings, and this is a critical way that we can be doing that in our state. I have an energy policy that I've put forward that you can find on my website at joycecraig.org. And it talks about a number of things in terms of decreasing costs for our residents and businesses, making sure we are diversifying our energy, wind, solar, our energy portfolio, and then preserving our environment, which we know electric cars certainly are doing.
So another question that we've gotten kind of piggybacks on that, which has to do with net metering and the cost of electricity. What are your proposals for those?
Yeah, so I'm supportive of net metering. I'm supportive of community power and making sure that cities and towns understand the value of that. The energy policy that I put forward, I worked with thought leaders in our state, and we are so fortunate to have tremendous expertise in New Hampshire, but there's so much more that we can be doing. There are limits in terms of solar right now, and we need to be opening that up. We are not at the table. New Hampshire is the only state in New England that's not at the table when we're talking about offshore wind. And I know there are concerns from the fishermen, but not being at the table is causing concern from my perspective, because I think we can address their concerns and also move forward with this renewable energy source that will also bring good paying jobs into New Hampshire. We have, as you mentioned, some of the highest energy costs. And some of the, we don't have very good rebate programs, and we need to be investing in those programs so that we are saving our residents money. We have a tremendous opportunity in New Hampshire to save money. And this is one of the things, too, that I see as a bipartisan issue, because when you look at the bills that came forward over the last few sessions, both Republicans and Democrats in the House have been trying to make progress moving toward renewable energy, but they've stopped at the governor's office. And I'm really committed to making a difference here and moving New Hampshire forward.
What is your plan for attracting more high-tech business here? Do you think that's a particular priority in terms of economic development?
Yeah, we've seen, a significant increase in Manchester in the southern tier. Like I mentioned, the biomanufacturing industry has exploded. Almost all of the mill buildings right now are housing innovative startup companies related to the biomanufacturing industry. It's, a new type of technology that we're seeing in New Hampshire. And, it started, but it's taking off because of the federal funds, the grant that I mentioned that, we went after. And I think there are tremendous opportunities to do more and to do better, and partnering with our business community and making sure that we are providing the resources they need to bring business here and to grow their business here. And I hate to keep going back to this, but the housing crisis and childcare crisis that we're seeing in New Hampshire plays a big piece in growing businesses or bringing businesses here. So that has to be a component. We have to consider and tackle that statewide challenge in order to really move this forward. And, I am committed to doing that.
We have a question about the interest and dividends tax, and there have been conflicting reports about what your proposal is related to that. So, can you clarify?
Sure. Yeah, I am opposed to giving a tax break for the most wealthy in our state at a time when hardworking families are hurting. And we know when this happens, that property taxes will increase. As mayor of Manchester, I have seen firsthand the downshifting from the state. So the state is not adequately funding our public schools. Those costs get downshifted to our local community and increase property taxes. And the state is not adequately funding pension for our first responders. And again, those costs get downshifted to our local communities and increase our local property taxes. I am going to be focused on doing everything we can to stop the downshifting to our local communities, and so that it's not affecting property taxes. As I'm traveling around the state, that is what I'm hearing from residents. The increase in property taxes are hurting our hardworking families. And as governor, I'm going to be doing everything that I can to decrease our local property taxes to help hardworking families in our state.
Do you have a plan for improving highways and bridges?
So it's a great question. One of the things that I did in Manchester when I first became mayor was did an assessment on all of the infrastructure that we had in the city because we didn't have a plan and funding behind that to address our infrastructure. And so we put a 5-year plan together that was transparent to our residents so they would see where funding was going and what roads were being fixed. And that's the same approach that I would bring to the governor's office. I think it's really important to be transparent with what we're doing and how we're utilizing our funds and keeping up and maintaining our infrastructure. One thing that I'd mention is that, we have seen the impacts of climate change in New Hampshire, and these once-in-a-lifetime storms are now happening within, sometimes year after year now. And our infrastructure is not built in a way to withstand these significant storms. And so we need to start considering changes in how we are building our infrastructure to ensure that they are built in a way that it's sustainable and can withstand the storms that we're now seeing.
And do you have a proposal to fund those things at the level that they would require?
It's part of the budget process. Certainly, infrastructure is a priority, as is public safety and public health and public education.
So here's a question. This is one of mine, which is you've talked about being a executive in Manchester. How have you studied the office of governor to identify the ways in which that's different from being a mayor and the way in which dealing with the state as a whole is different from the specific city of Manchester? What have you kind of isolated as the key differences and your learning curve on taking on that different role?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate to have former Governor Lynch and Senator Hassan and Senator Shaheen as supporters and mentors, and have learned a lot from them in terms of what the role of governor is and what the opportunities are. I've also spent a lot of time traveling across the state, meeting with people, meeting with small business owners, hearing firsthand the challenges that they're facing and the opportunities that they'd like to see. And as mayor, I worked with mayors from across the state and local elected officials and state departments, as well as the governor. So I understand the role that the governor and different departments in Concord play with the local communities. And I'll give you I'll give you an example. As we all know, the state funds programs that come into our local communities. One of the issues that is continuing even under the new mayor in Manchester now is that the state isn't transparent with funding or programs that are coming into our local communities. And that has to change. And we need to be working together so that we are meeting the needs and using the limited dollars that we have most effectively and efficiently. So, as you may know, the state has a doorway program. There are a number of doorways located across the state. The purpose of those doorways are for individuals suffering from substance use disorder, mental health, or homelessness to be able to walk in to a doorway and be connected to a service. In Manchester, the doorway is located next to probation and parole. And for years, we've been telling the state people aren't comfortable going there, and they continue to sign the same contract, and they haven't moved the location, and people aren't going, and it's not being used as effectively as it could be. The second part of that is that individuals can go, the state pays for 1 month for an individual to go to a sober home. Evidence shows that an individual who's in a sober home should be there for 5 to 6 months to really be on a path to wellness. They're very expensive, and what we see in Manchester and other communities is that someone will go in and they won't be able to afford to stay there after 1 month, and unfortunately, they have to leave. They go back on the street, they start using again, and then they decide to go to detox and go through the process again. But we're seeing a revolving door. And again, this isn't the best way to help someone. So I feel strongly that the work that I've done at the local level and what I see at the local level, and again, working with mayors from across the state, is very valuable to be bringing to the governor's office to be able to help strengthen our local communities.
So we've got just a few minutes left, and can you comment on the legalization of marijuana?
Sure. It is something that is overwhelmingly wanted. I think over 60% of residents in New Hampshire are looking to legalize cannabis. New Hampshire is the only state in New England that doesn't have legalization. I am supportive of that. I am supportive of a small business model that will support New Hampshire small businesses, New Hampshire farms, that is regulated and taxed. And I would like to see those taxes go toward affordable housing and public education. When we do legalize it, it will be tested and labeled so people will know what they're using. And obviously we'll work with law enforcement, and the state will provide education on what we'll be doing.
I have one more question I want to ask you, and then if you could give a compressed answer, because I then one short final thing of my own to ask you, just in terms of helping older citizens in the state with housing and rising costs of services related to elders.
Yeah, it's very important. And, as mayor, we actually put forward a program that helped seniors make modifications to their homes. So turn a tub into a shower or build a ramp so that they could stay in their home. But what we're seeing is, to your point, seniors are not able to stay in their home. And so we need to start building affordable housing to make sure that we can keep our seniors and they can afford to stay in New Hampshire. Working with AARP, they have a program right now where they're actually matching up seniors to live with them with each other. And I think that's something that the state could help in. But at the end of the day, we need to start building housing that is affordable. We can't wait. We need to start building now.
So this, on my behalf and on behalf of the forum, is something that I'm going to ask you and Senator Ayotte, and something which I actually asked her the last time that she ran for office statewide, and that she agreed to, which is that we are in a divisive political time, as you know, and in great need of coming together. So I would like to invite the two of you on Thursday after Election Day, win or lose or votes still being counted, to meet me and a group of clergy from around Greater Nashua, to have a conversation around a table just about what we can do to set an example of reconciliation in the state, and then perhaps, if we all agree, to make some public statement as well. I'm issuing you that invitation. Will you come Thursday after the election?
Sure. I'd be happy to.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, Mayor Joyce Craig, thank you so much for joining us, for talking with us, and for serving our public and our community. And good luck as you go into your day.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. We are about to welcome Senator Ayotte, if we have not already. Let's see.
Hi, Rabbi John. I'm here.
Hi, Senator. Welcome so much.
Myself. No worries.
Good. You're good. Well, welcome, Senator Kelly Ayotte, who is running as the Republican nominee for governor of New Hampshire. Welcome. We are here for, and some people have joined since this forum began. So again, I just want to welcome everybody here for the Southern New Hampshire Jewish Men's Club. I am moderating, which is that mostly this is a chance for us to give our questions to you, Senator Ayotte, and for me to funnel them to you. If I have some specific question in my own name, I will name that myself. But we wanted to give you up to 15 minutes, if you like, to introduce yourself or say anything that you would like, and then we'll have time for questions. For anybody who has a question you'd like me to pass along, put it in the chat, and I will do my best to get as many of them as possible in. Senator Ayotte.
Well, thank you so much for having me this morning. And since I had the 15 minutes, I thought I'd touch on a number of different areas. And I first of all just want to thank you, Rabbi John, for hosting this. And I know you've done that in the past, and I appreciate it. I also had the opportunity to sit down with a group that you put together during the primary, and I thought that was a really good discussion as well. I hope all of you who observed Yom Kippur yesterday had a meaningful fast. I know Yom Kippur is a time of reflection and hope for renewal. And this period of reflection has been particularly difficult, I know, for the Jewish community in light of the 1-year anniversary of the terrorist attacks that occurred on October 7th of last year. Yom Kippur is also a time for atonement and healing, which we know we need so much of in the world right now. I pray that the hostages that were taken on October 7th last year, they're returned safely to their families, and that there is obviously, those who are suffering and who have lost someone that they love, that they find some comfort and peace in such a very difficult situation, and that Israel finds peace, because this is very important, obviously, and for the world. And when I was a senator, I had the opportunity to travel to Israel more than once, and it's a beautiful country. Also a very meaningful place, no matter what your religious background. And I found it very moving myself to be at the Western Wall when I was a U.S. senator. As governor, if I have the privilege of being governor, I look forward to standing with the Jewish community, and there, no toleration for any anti-Semitism in this state. I think that's something that we should never face. But if it does happen, I want you to know that I would stand with you and do whatever we can to make sure that we have a culture in New Hampshire of acceptance, and one that is, of course, not hating people for their religious or any other reason. So this morning, I just wanted to touch base. I had the privilege of serving as Attorney General of our state, and then, of course, as a United States Senator. And over the last 6 or 7 years, I have been raising my teenagers. And my husband, Joe, and I were from Nashua. We were born here. We still live here. And so we'll be here our whole lives. Our family is here as well. We very much love this community. And in addition to that, service is very important to our family. My husband served in the United States Air Force. He was a fighter pilot. And then we have a daughter who is a sophomore at the Air Force Academy now, following in her dad's footsteps, which is nice to watch. And we still have our teenager, Jacob, who is a junior in high school at home. Over the last 6 years, I've had the opportunity to work with some great companies here in New Hampshire and across the country. I think that's added to the experience that I have, not only in the public sector, but to have that private sector experience including chairing the board for BAE Systems, which is our largest manufacturing employer, but also working with some nonprofits that I care deeply about. You've heard we're a military family, so I've worked with Veterans Count, with Easter Seals to help our veterans, and another nonprofit, Swim with a Mission, that's focused also on helping veterans and the Navy SEALs and their families. Let me just say to anyone who served on the call, thank you for your service to our nation. And I will say that the reason I decided to run for governor is that Joe and I feel very blessed to live in New Hampshire. We have a beautiful state, and I can't think of any more important cause than serving New Hampshire. It was, to be honest, you don't choose necessarily to lose an election, but it was a blessed period in my life in terms of the time I got to spend with my teenagers and also raising my children. But I love this state, and that's why I decided to get back in the political arena to run for governor. Over the last 8 years under Governor Sununu's leadership, New Hampshire has been in a strong position. And if you look at where our state is ranked nationally, we're the #1 state for return on taxpayer investment. We are the #1 state ranked for economic and personal freedom. We're the #1 state ranked for child well-being. We also have the lowest tax burden in the nation and the lowest poverty rate in the nation. In addition to that, we've been consistently ranked either the first or second in terms of the safest states in the nation. Even with those positive rankings, I believe that New Hampshire's best days lie ahead of us. As governor, I would like to work with all of you to, #1, protect our New Hampshire advantage, fix our housing crisis, strengthen our mental health system, and keep our communities safe. The New Hampshire advantage is real. It is something that it's important to protect. It is allowing us to be prosperous, and in many ways, as we think about it, it gives us a critical economic edge with no income tax, no sales tax, no estate taxes, keeping business taxes low and competitive. And we have an opportunity here in New Hampshire to recruit even more excellent businesses, especially since Massachusetts has made some decisions over the last several years that is actually causing really an outflow of people and capital to come here to New Hampshire because they appreciate our New Hampshire advantage, and they, of course, love our quality of life and what we stand for. I, as governor, certainly look forward to rolling up my sleeves and going directly to businesses that would provide the jobs of the future for New Hampshire, whether it's in technology, whether it's exciting as we think about regenerative medicine, Dean Kamen's project in Manchester. But there's some exciting opportunities throughout the state that, as governor, working with the business community and also, working with local communities with areas they have open, how do we recruit good businesses here that can help boost our economy and create good paying jobs? And I think that experience in the private sector will help me do that. But in order to do that, there are a few issues that we really need to take head on. The #1 issue, of course, is housing. We do not have enough housing in this state, and we need more housing of all forms, whether it's single family homes, apartments, whether it's manufactured housing, tiny homes, you name it, all of the above. And so we need to work together to build more housing. The ideas that I would have is this: first of all, in order to build anything in this state, you have to get, of course, state approval, and you have to have local approval. We've always had that local voice, and I do respect that local voice. I think it's important for people to weigh in their community on these issues through their local zoning and planning boards. But at the state level, you need approval from multiple agencies, whether it's DOT, DES, Fish and Game. And that process, from having campaigned across the state, is not working efficiently for individuals or people who want to build larger developments. So we're going to overhaul that process using the really things that I've learned in the private sector called lean, the lean process. It's often used in manufacturing, and make it a 60-day process. Make it transparent. You can get an answer, make sure that all the agencies are communicating with each other so that the state models good behavior. And then we'll bring everyone together from the state officials to the local officials to the private sector to convene and say, oh, how are we going to work together throughout the state? And we'll have to do several of these meetings in different areas of the state because challenges are different in different areas of the state to find ways to work together to build more housing. One thing the state can do is to incentivize local communities on issues like infrastructure, so roads, water, sewer, those kinds of infrastructure dollars, the resources that have been at bear with the Invest New Hampshire Fund, also New Hampshire Financing Authority, New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. I was just recently at a project in Rochester this past week. It's a great example of how the New Hampshire housing came together with resources from HUD and the private sector to build an affordable housing project that's going forward. And so more of those types of projects in the state. And as governor, I hope to be a good partner to champion those issues and to really bring people together so that we can build more housing. In addition to housing, one of the challenges, of course, that we have is energy. We have some of the highest energy costs in the region, and that hits families. That hits, of course, businesses, everyone. So in terms of of our energy profile, I want to make sure that we're leaning into energy forms of all types so that we can have more of a supply here in New Hampshire to help drive down our rates. In addition to that, I'd like to look at making sure that New Hampshire is positioned for new technologies, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's small modular nuclear. And those things are not something we may be able to do immediately, although there is a hydrogen project going up in the northern part of New Hampshire right now. It's in its infancy. But looking forward and looking ahead puts New Hampshire in a stronger position to make sure that we can be an early adopter of things like small modular nuclear, which of course would be carbon neutral, would allow us to produce our own energy. So I look forward to thinking forward with all of you and the business community to make sure that we can do all we can to protect ratepayers and to have a reliable, resilient energy here in New Hampshire. In addition, as we think about the ability to thrive here in New Hampshire, we need a strong education system. And my husband now teaches middle school math. So he's on his third career. He was a fighter pilot, and then he had his own business for 15 years. He was home for a little while, and he says, "What?" I said, "Well, you're too young to be home, I think." And so I said, "So what is it that you feel passionate about?" And he decided that teaching was his passion. But our kids are behind in math. They're behind in reading. They're behind in literacy. So it's important that and I'm also a product of Nashua Public Schools, but it's really important as we look at our curriculum standards that those are strong, that we're also not passing on, that there's a continuum between the elementary school, the junior high, the high school to put kids in a successful position. And it really comes down to our teachers. And the state has put more resources in education, but I want the resources to be focused on recruitment and retention of our teachers who have such difficult jobs. And obviously, I think working with our community colleges as well as the university system, how do we make it easier to become a teacher, more affordable to become a teacher, to have the right kind of training? And as we think about education, of course, we want to make our university system more affordable. And over the last biennium, the state put in about a 10% increase for our university system. But I also think we need to look beyond the four-year degree and really think about our career technical education. I had the opportunity recently to sit down not only with the chancellor of the university system, but also our community college system. And there's a great need in our state for workforce in the trades, in advanced manufacturing. And I believe we should be putting more resources into those community colleges, into those partnerships on career technical education. And that is something that I'm certainly going to be getting behind very strongly as governor. And also those public-private partnerships. For example, in Nashua at the community college, there's a partnership between BAE Systems and the community college that has a microelectronics boot camp. It's a certificate program. BAE provided the equipment and some of the support, and everyone who comes out of that program, it's a 9-month program, is guaranteed an interview with BAE, but it's not just about BAE. A lot of other employers in the area are getting workforce from there, and these are good paying jobs. In fact, I met a young woman yesterday who's in the program, and she said it's been terrific for her. She already has several job offers. that are really good paying jobs, much better than what she was doing before. And I think it's also about getting in with our high school guidance counselors early on some of these opportunities for our young people, and to keep these good jobs here, but also to let them know what the full array of opportunities they have for success and to stay here in New Hampshire. In order to improve our quality of life, one issue that impacts everything really we do is mental health. And I dare say that everyone on this call has had someone who, or maybe perhaps themselves, who at some point has struggled with mental illness. And especially during COVID, people felt very isolated. And we need to strengthen our mental health system here in New Hampshire. You know, we have had a lack of acute beds. And so we've had people sitting in emergency rooms, and that's obviously not a proper way to care for people, nor is it the right thing to do. So there are some efforts at the state hospital, and then Solution Health is working on a plan to add 144 beds. So I look forward to continuing to say, how can we grow, make sure that we have the proper number of beds for those who need that acute care. But it goes beyond that to our community mental health system, and making sure those community health mental health systems are strong in each area of the state. And we do not have enough mental health providers. So this is an area where I would like to leverage our community colleges and our university systems for scholarships, loan forgiveness. If you are willing to work in New Hampshire in mental health for 5 years, then we should be taking care of your education so that you can help us make sure that our quality of life is there. Because we all know that if you're struggling with a mental health issue, you cannot wait 30 days to get in to see someone. And the more we can help people who are struggling, the more we can allow them to lead productive lives, and the state will be much stronger. One final issue I wanted to touch upon was public safety. Having served as Attorney General of the state, I had the privilege of working very closely with our law enforcement community, and a number of them have supported me and endorsed me in this campaign. But we have a real recruitment and retention issue when it comes to police officers in this state. We are down 64 troopers. We're down 41% of our corrections officers. In Nashua, they're down officers. At one point, they were down 20 officers, Manchester as well. In fact, I've had a chance to talk to Chief Rourke about this issue and how we might address it. And there were some changes made to our retirement system in 2011 for our first responders. It's called Group 2. And we really need to reevaluate those changes and make some changes back, because it's not competitive anymore. And it's a very difficult job. So that is going to be important to me, to make sure that we can keep recruiting not only our police officers, but our firefighters whose jobs have become more difficult. And then making sure that we have the right laws in place. So one of the things Chief Rourke shared with me is a real concern about changes that were made to our bail law, bail reform, that caused a revolving door in some instances that was dangerous for the community. And I'll give you an example. In Nashua, 2 of his officers were assaulted. They were hospitalized, and the man who assaulted them was back on the street before they were out of the hospital. And so making some changes there, the legislature made a step forward in this cycle. I'm concerned that it doesn't go far enough of making sure that we're protecting the community with a strong bail law. So that's something that I'll be working on as governor. And then when it comes to fentanyl, in the United States Senate, I worked across the aisle.
I just want to make sure that we are able to move on to questions.
Okay, we have 15 minutes. Sorry, I just keep talking. Sorry about that. If we're at 15 minutes, I'm happy to wrap up. Let me just wrap up with this. First of all, in the Senate, I was one of the most bipartisan senators. I was originally appointed Attorney General by a Democrat, Governor John Lynch, originally appointed by a Republican, Governor Craig Benson. I was reappointed twice by Governor John Lynch. I know how to work with other people to get things done. We have a phenomenal state. I want to keep us on a prosperous path, take on our challenges, and make sure that New Hampshire remains even stronger. I hope to have the opportunity to work with everyone who's on this call, because I can't do that alone, and I don't have all the answers. So I look forward to hearing from you. I hope I can call on you if I'm governor, even to serve on a board or commission, to be part of our great state to make us stronger. So let me turn it over to Rabbi John for questions. And I'm sorry, 15 minutes goes by fast. Thanks.
No, thank you for your statement. And we've got about 10 minutes or so. And I don't want to have to time per se the answers. Certainly we want
I'll
through
try to get through as many as I want. I had comments I thought were 15 and I went long. Sorry.
So, just in terms of bipartisanship, how do you think about that in a state, a legislature that's likely to be closely divided? When is it that bipartisan is important, and when is standing on the principles that is the platform that you run on? When do you say that's bipartisan is not the highest priority?
Well, we all have strong personal feelings and principles. I mean, we run on those principles, and I think your core principles, you're going to stick with them, but there are always opportunities to find common ground. I did that in the US Senate, whether it's on the opioid bill that we got passed. I've worked with Jeanne Shaheen on multiple issues. And so I will do that as governor, and you have to do that as governor, especially if you have a closely divided legislature. The budget is critical, and you have to work across the aisle to get a responsible budget and a budget that serves the needs of the people of New Hampshire. So I feel like your job as governor is to work with everyone to address issues in New Hampshire and to make sure that you deliver results. So I will do that.
So one issue that clearly is a division among the parties is abortion. And if you are presented with a bill from majorities in the legislature to make access to abortion more restrictive, what will you do? And how about in terms of what you think about funding for Planned Parenthood?
Well, first of all, I think our current law, and if you've seen enough on your TV about this, but I support our current law. I will not, I don't. If something is more restrictive sent to me that's more restrictive, I will veto it. I've been very clear on that. Our current law allows women the freedom to obtain an abortion for up to 6 months of pregnancy for any reason. And in the last 3 months, if a woman has a medical emergency or her baby has an issue like a fatal fetal anomaly, she can still obtain an abortion. And so I believe that is a coming together around a difficult issue here in New Hampshire. So I would veto anything more restrictive sent to my desk. When it comes to preventative health care for women, this is something I worked very closely on in the United States Senate, whether more access to mammograms, whether more access to preventative care. And so I think that, what I would be concerned about is I don't believe that taxpayer funding should be used for abortion, but for preventative care, mammograms, all those things, that's important. And our community health centers are something that I want to boost up and put more resources in as governor to do that.
Sorry. In terms of bringing more good jobs, you referenced a bit the New England environment that we're in. What do you think the most potent ideas are that the governor and the state can do for creating more good jobs in New Hampshire?
Well, I think the most potent thing I can do is champion more housing. So that's number one, because I meet employers every day that would love to expand in New Hampshire, but they need more housing, number one. Number two, affordable energy. So those have to be core to recruiting more businesses. But also, I think as governor, you really have to target these businesses. You have to bring everyone to the table, and you need to go after them. Meaning go after them with your state economic experts, along with the local communities that you want to market these businesses to. And I will do that very aggressively as governor, really roll up my sleeves and make sure that we're targeting businesses to come to New Hampshire that have excellent paying jobs and are really thinking about the jobs of the future that will help keep our young people here. The other issue we haven't talked about is childcare. That's a real challenge along with housing. So working with the business community, any incentives I can provide, whether it's on the tax basis to allow them to also expand their childcare capabilities, would be important as well.
What's your approach to the New Hampshire Education Freedom Accounts and making sure that the money is used, wisely for excellent education?
I support the New Hampshire Education Freedom Accounts. I'm also a strong supporter of our public schools. That's Joe and I were graduates of Nashville High. We went all the way through our public school system here. But I've seen those education freedom accounts for kids that the public schools are failing. giving them an opportunity, especially those who are up to 350% of poverty, to be able to go in the venue and be in the venue that works best for them to have the opportunity to succeed. We want every child to succeed. And I think that, all of our standards should be strong, meaning, that we're really looking at how are we succeeding in math and English and literacy, but also thinking about opportunities to give our kids, whether in the public schools or in a private school or a charter school, however the background, more opportunities also just to be out and doing things, whether learning with a business or learning with a nonprofit. So I'd love to be able to support more of those efforts as well.
It's a question from me. You were part of the bipartisan immigration group when you were a senator.
Yes.
So what can you do to advocate the immigration policies that you support while also moving your party away from demonizing immigrants? And specifically, what can you do as a candidate and governor to set clearly a different tone and to reassure New Hampshire immigrant communities?
Well, we're a country of legal immigrants. We're all, I'm guessing that most of us on this line can trace our family history to coming to this country from somewhere else. And so I'm a strong supporter of legal immigration. I was in the US Senate, and I will be as governor, and making sure that everyone feels welcome here. But I do think that we do need to secure our borders, that we should also be taking steps to make sure that New Hampshire, I don't support sanctuary policies, that we're not a sanctuary state in terms of not allowing the local law enforcement to cooperate with federal authorities on criminal matters. And so there is that. I think the bill that I support in the United States Senate addressed sort of all the above. It strengthened our legal immigration system, and it also addressed the southern border in particular, and also the northern border in terms of more border enforcement, really making sure that we were doing both. And I think that we need to do that. As governor, I certainly will be someone to keep New Hampshire safe, to protect New Hampshire on the issues of, crime and making sure we're not a sanctuary state. But I'll also be very welcoming to legal immigrants who I think are important to our country. And if there's ways to make sure that legal immigrants to this country also know the job opportunities they have. So much of our employers need more workforce. So that'll be something I would do, also working with the business community for legal immigrants in our country.
What is your view of marijuana in the state?
I don't support legalizing marijuana in the state, and let me tell you why. First of all, I'm very concerned about the mental health impact on our youth. We really have some serious mental health challenges at the moment, and the studies that have been done on this. There was actually a recent New York Times article that I would commend to you that also debunks some of the myths that marijuana is not addictive. People who are having real challenges with the chronic use of marijuana. And there's also been studies done showing that between the ages of 15 and 25, that marijuana consumption of all forms increases incidence of schizophrenia, other mental health issues. So I don't think adding that in the mix, and there is a different symbol when the state says something's legal versus not. So I've not met a person in recovery yet who says we should legalize marijuana, that would help our already existing drug challenges. And I ask myself this question at the end of the day: will this improve our quality of life in New Hampshire? And the answer I come up with is no. So I know everyone says, wow, everyone around you is doing it. But I would say what I also often say to my children: that's not a very good argument. Just because everyone else is doing it, should we do it? Is it the right thing for New Hampshire? And I also think at some point it may come to New Hampshire, but I hope at that point we will be solving the issues of driving. So driving under the influence of marijuana, so we can measure it like alcohol. And I know our police want to make sure that that's resolved too, because states who have done this have seen an increase in traffic deaths. So we want to make sure we address that issue. And we also want to make sure we address it in a way that is responsible, that protects people, and that also deals with the addiction challenges and mental health challenges that come with it.
So we're about at the end of our time with you, and I want to ask you a question, which will be familiar from me from the last time I think you ran for office statewide, and it's something I asked Mayor Craig as well. We are in a divisive time politically, and I would like to invite you once again to come on Thursday after the election. Win, lose, or the votes are still being counted, to meet with Mayor Craig.
Let's hope the votes aren't still being counted.
Let's hope they
aren't. Our sake, right?
To come to the temple to meet with me and some other area clergy for a conversation about peace and reconciliation among our community, and perhaps to go out and make some statements to the public to begin that process in what will be, as I say, an environment that we are concerned about because of its divisiveness. So, as you agreed to last time, and as Mayor Craig a half hour ago also agreed to, will you come and meet with us on Thursday after the election?
Yes, I will. And I certainly appreciate what you're trying to do in the community, Rabbi John. And I want to thank everyone here for being on the line. And sorry if I spoke too long up front, but I just hope that if I have the privilege of being governor, that I have the opportunity, or not, I live in the Nashua community, to sit down with all of you again. And then also I can call on you to help me be a good governor, make our state stronger. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Ayotte, for making this time for us and for your service in our community. Good luck with the rest of your day.
Thank you.
And I believe we are welcoming now Congressman Pappas. Is that right?
I'm here. Good morning.
Welcome. Good morning. Representative Pappas, welcome so much. This is Chris Pappas, who currently serving as U.S. Representative for the 1st District of New Hampshire and the Democratic Party's nominee for that seat once again. I'm going to welcome you to this Southern New Hampshire Jewish Men's Club forum once again. And we have a half an hour together, and we want to give you about half that time, or up to. You don't have to use it all to say whatever you would like to us. And then I am here really just primarily to facilitate questions from people here, many of whom are and would be your constituents. And so again, to the audience, and for people who may have come in recently, if you have a question you'd like Congressman Pappas to address, chat it to me, and I will go through them and try to ask as many of them as possible. So Representative Pappas.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Spira-Savett. It's an honor to be with you, to the members of the club, as well as other members of the congregation and folks far and wide who are joining the Zoom. It's great to be with you. I hope you all had a meaningful Yom Kippur. And certainly it was an eventful week in New Hampshire. I know I was with some of you at the State House on Monday as we commemorated the dark anniversary of the October 7th brutal attacks on Jewish civilians in Israel. And, my heart goes out to the families that continue to grieve, and to Jewish communities all around the world as that anniversary was commemorated. I think that it's an important time for folks to be together, to be hearing from one another, and to be figuring out how we can address issues that are coming up here in our own state, including the rise of hate and anti-Semitism. And I hope we can have a little bit more of a discussion on the need to confront that. I do want to make sure as an elected official that you know that as we see evidence of that in our own backyard, we've got to make sure that it's not just the Jewish community that feels like it's having to confront this, that our entire political leadership and community leaders, regardless of their faith background, join together in confronting it and rooting it out. And that's part of what I continue to hope to do as a member of Congress representing New Hampshire. Now, some of you aren't constituents. You might be in the 2nd Congressional District, but really, we're a small state and we're one state, and the issues are pretty uniform across the state of New Hampshire. And so I look forward to the conversation here this morning. And for those of you who don't know me, and I'm just getting to meet some of you, just wanted to give you a little bit of background on me and my journey through politics and what I've been up to over the last couple of years serving New Hampshire and Washington. I've lived my entire life in Manchester, grew up in the city, went to public schools, ran a family small business. That's what I was doing day to day before I got to Congress. My family has a restaurant business in Manchester that's been open for 107 years now. So we're just getting going. And when you come from an experience like that, it's about the connections that you make with people who come through your doors. It's about serving others. It's about figuring out how to solve problems, but also how you can make people's lives better in the greater community. And so for me, there was a natural jumping off point to get into public service and to figure out at a different level how to give back to a state that has given me so many opportunities in my own life. So I'm in my third term, running for reelection, and it's a true honor to be able to serve in Congress. And the reason that I'm seeking to stay in this line of work and stay in the fight is really to work to make a difference for the people of New Hampshire. To me, public service is about people. It's about the difference that we can make in people's day-to-day lives, how we can bring our state and our country closer together and solve problems. But we know that politics is all too divisive right now. And I think there's no more evidence of that than what we've seen play out in Washington over the last 2 years in particular. We've seen a lot of chaos and discord over the last term. But not a lot of solutions when it comes to the day-to-day issues that people face. And we need to be working to turn the page and to move in a direction where we're putting people's lived experiences front and center, and we're finding solutions to make people's lives better. So for me, this is about serving New Hampshire and figuring out how we can work across the aisle and repair sort of our broken political system so that it functions for people. I was named one of the most bipartisan members of Congress on my side of the aisle because I think a bipartisan approach is what Granite Staters deserve. And frankly, given how close the margins are in both the House and Senate right now, and they're likely to remain that way even after the election dust settles, the best way to get things done is to have a bipartisan approach. And so that will always be my guiding principle as I move forward. And I serve on 3 committees in the House, the Veterans Affairs Committee, the Small Business Committee, and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And believe it or not, there are a number of bipartisan opportunities on those committees to get things done. I can mention a few issues that we've taken up through our committee work, including the bipartisan infrastructure law. We're in the 3rd year now of that program. It's delivering important funding to our communities in New Hampshire, including investments in our roads and bridges, our high-speed broadband internet network, making sure that we've got clean drinking water, that we're upgrading aging sewer systems. And we've seen overall coming to New Hampshire about a 30% increase in the amount of federal funds that is allowing us to get more projects done. It's helping us to improve safety and quality of life. It's creating good paying jobs along the way. And so my commitment, should I be reelected, is to try to sustain and capitalize on some of the recent investments we've seen coming to New Hampshire. When it comes to closing the digital divide, we know that about 10% of folks in our state don't have access to high-speed broadband. That could be both because they lack the infrastructure in their community, could also be because they can't afford to get online. So we've addressed this from both delivering funding that's coming to New Hampshire to close those last miles, but also we look to restart a program that expired back in April that provides an affordable way for people to get online. That's critical for seniors that are getting on a telehealth appointment. It's critical for students that are working to take classes online too. That program was utilized by over 20,000 Granite Staters. It's the Affordable Connectivity Program, something we're fighting to extend. With respect to my work on veterans, I think there's no more sacred obligation than what we can do to support those who have worn the uniform of our country and their family members. That's why I chose to be assigned to that committee. We passed a major bill called the PACT Act, which is connecting our veterans with care and benefits, those who have been exposed to toxic substances. So it's an important step forward. We're also working to close the gaps in New Hampshire, bring more community providers into the VA network, and ensure that veterans get transportation and services wherever they live, even in rural and disconnected areas. I'm also focused on what we can do to lower costs right now, because I think it's absolutely critical that we understand that people are paying a lot for their housing, for their groceries, for their energy. And we've got to focus on what we can do to make life less expensive for families. That's why I support expanding the child tax credit that would put more money back in the pockets of hardworking Granite State families. When we had this in place during the pandemic, we were able to cut child poverty in half in the United States in just a matter of months. And we also need to work to make sure that housing is affordable and within reach. We know we're 60,000 units short by the end of the decade of having an adequate housing stock, and of the lack of supply has driven up costs. And so we have to work to expand federal tax credits and programs that are often the difference maker in terms of whether or not a project can get built. We also need to work with communities to make sure that they can reimagine their zoning and innovate to be able to construct the affordable housing that New Hampshire needs for its future. We're also focused on making childcare a national priority to both support the providers of childcare who have been under great financial strain of late, and also direct support to our families. I meet a lot of families that are paying more for their childcare than for their mortgages. It's an exorbitant price that they pay to be able to be in the workforce. And so this is a family issue as well as it is an economic issue and a workforce development issue. I also think it's important at this moment to recognize that we've got to be standing with our allies around the world. And I was proud to support security legislation that provided additional direct support to our allies in Ukraine as they face a fight for their independence in a war each and every day that Russia has brought to their doorstep that is killing innocent civilians each and every day. I'm also a passionate believer in the bipartisan relationship that we have built over the years between the United States and Israel. And that couldn't be more important right now. As we know, Israel remains under attack. Since October 7th, we have supported direct assistance to Israel, as well as making sure that the United States has a presence in the region to support Israel's defense. We've seen 2 direct attacks from Iran. And just a couple weeks ago, when Iran sent about 180 ballistic missiles toward Israel, there were also other Iran-backed militias and terrorist groups in the region that were attacking Israel at the same moment. So we know this continues to be a time where Israel is challenged in terms of their security. The United States needs to continue to work to support them, to make sure that they have the resources to keep people safe. And we also need to keep hope alive for a peaceful resolution to this conflict over the long term. And so working with allies from around the world, including Arab partners from the region, is important for our foreign policy, and also providing the kind of humanitarian assistance that's needed for people that are caught in harm's way, whether that's in the Middle East or any other part of the world. That's important, an important aspect of our foreign policy. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. Look, I know that things do seem very chaotic in Washington, but I think if you look back just a couple years ago, where we were able to get a number of major bipartisan initiatives across the finish line, bills like the CHIPS and Science Act, the infrastructure law, the veterans bill that I mentioned, we are not too far away from being able to move forward together. And I think that's what the people of New Hampshire deserve right now. So this is about working to cut costs, defending freedoms, including reproductive freedom, which is truly on the ballot this year. It's a big difference between myself and my opponent. And also making sure that our democracy is going to be secure and be able to deliver the kind of results that people can count on. So thanks again for the forum. Look forward to your thoughts and questions. And please feel free to reach out to us anytime, whether it's in the political capacity as I'm out there campaigning, or through our official office if we can ever be of any assistance.
Thank you. So again, I want to invite people to put questions in the chat. We need more of them. Let me just address you. First of all, thank you for being there with the Jewish community, for being there with many of us, as you said a week ago, and your solidarity and support with us. I want to try to ask you just a different question about it, just to get a little insight into how you serve around this issue. You've been hearing from so many constituents, certainly within the Jewish community, and different voices and other constituents. What would you say is the thing about the Israel-Palestinian conflict that you have learned the most about this year, either from your own researches or from listening to constituents that have either helped you or challenged you, and how you're thinking about the role you play in Congress around these issues in the Middle East?
Yeah. Well, Israel is obviously a special place to so many people. And I think what was really important for all of us to understand early on in the fog of the attack of October 7th was how different that particular attack was. I remember texting with friends who were in Israel. I have a college roommate who made Aliyah and has been there as a lawyer over the last 15 or 20 years. Another friend who's there, other folks that I've met through my travels. I've been to Israel 3 times. And they wanted to make absolutely clear that this attack was very different, was all encompassing, and that everyone in Israel was 1 degree away from knowing someone who had been killed or had been taken hostage. And so I think just the deepness of the impact on both Israeli citizens as well as Jewish communities around the world was really important to understand and take stock of. And so, I think as we've moved forward, it's been important for me to hear from hostage family members who have traveled to Washington, from government leaders in Israel about how things are continuing to progress on the home front. And so, I do think that this is about whether or not we're going to support the ability of the Jewish homeland, our ally Israel, to continue to exist. And for me, that's presented opportunities to vote on legislation. I've also stood up to members of my own party, frankly, when I felt like they were saying things that were out of line or were trafficking in anti-Semitic or anti-Israel tropes. And I will continue to provide that kind of independent leadership. I do feel like I've developed a connection with the Jewish community in New Hampshire. Just a few weeks after October 7th, I was in Laconia visiting with community members. And it was in the wake of some really horrific anti-Semitic graffiti and vandalism that had sprouted up in that community. And so I think just standing together, showing solidarity is really important, because for too many, even in our own state, people have been looking over their shoulder. They felt a sense of unease over the last year. And so it is a deeply personal experience in terms of how people are connected to what happened on October 7th, what has happened in the wake of it. And I want to make sure that we're providing the help and support, not just strategically to Israel, but also personally to the community here. And I do think that, we have seen a lot of actors on the national level try to use this as sort of a political wedge issue, and we can't allow that to happen. What I know in terms of U.S. foreign policy and our interests is that governments will come and go. Majorities, here in our own country and certainly in Israel will come and go. And we need a consistent policy that is rooted in our objectives as Americans and also our enduring support for our ally. So that's how I'll continue to approach issues. And, I appreciate the question. Happy to hear any more thoughts on that.
And do you think that you or your New Hampshire team have a role in helping to try to bring about relationships or conversations between Jewish and Arab citizens or Jewish and Muslim citizens, people who are tied in different ways to do some relationship or peacemaking here in the state?
Oh, absolutely. And we listen to people from all corners, right? I've had a number of really, healthy exchanges with folks who write in, call into our office, show up in person. And I think that's part of certainly our American democracy, but it also is important at a moment like this because we have to foster understanding. We have to give people the space to be able to express their views. We also have to listen and learn from one another too, I think. And too often, you can see sort of a knee-jerk reaction happening. But I think it's an important moment to try to lower the temperature where we can and foster greater understanding. That's particularly important on college campuses where, we have seen protests get out of control. We have seen encampments become breeding ground for anti-Semitism. It's really important that people have the opportunity to hear from folks of diverse backgrounds and experiences and create a conversation. And it doesn't mean that we'll always agree, but let's at least figure out where we can go, because over the long term, that's the only way we're going to achieve a lasting peace that provides security and allows people to live and coexist.
So we'll switch direction to some other kinds of questions. There are, and some of this goes to, being a congressman serving New Hampshire, but also obviously serving in the national legislature. There are a lot of high-tech businesses in New Hampshire around new advances in biomedical technology. What is your plan to help those businesses expand and succeed, and how much in ways that would benefit New Hampshire particularly?
Well, I do think we're at an exciting moment for New Hampshire. We have seen a significant growth in the life sciences industry. I was just this week at the launch of a new trade association that represents life sciences companies, that includes major hospitals that you've heard of, but also pharmaceutical companies like Lonza, which is out at Pease, which was manufacturing the vaccine right in our own backyard. A company called Novacure, which is doing terrific work unlocking breakthroughs for really difficult to treat forms of cancer, including glioblastoma. Right here in the Mill Yard in Manchester, obviously we have Army, that I'm sure you've heard of, which is part of regenerative medicine and kind of a new frontier of how we manufacture tissue in a lab that is specialized to your own stem cells and can help treat chronic conditions like diabetes, but also has the promise, for transplants for people who need new organs, including our war fighters and members of the military. So there's a lot happening in this space. And what we've tried to do is, through the CHIPS and Science Act, secure funding that will be invested in New Hampshire's economy, including the bioeconomy. And so we did receive that award for the Regen Valley, which is designated as a tech hub under the CHIPS and Science Act, one of, I believe, 31 tech hubs around the country. And so this is going to attract significant private investment, as well as interest from higher ed and from healthcare companies all across the country. And so it should provide a significant boost in terms of the employment picture in New Hampshire and the number of folks that are seeking to locate to our state. So that's some of the good news in terms of, I think, where our economy has been moving in a cutting edge direction. And I do think that there is a federal role to play in terms of encouraging the kind of partnerships and cooperation that have brought about that tech hub designation and the Army initiative in the Mill Yard in Manchester. And I think there are great benefits for the entire state if we're smart about how we focus on workforce development and also ensure that we're addressing issues like housing, which are directly connected to our ability to, fully take advantage of some of these economic opportunities.
What is the next step for Congress in terms of global warming, and maybe even in particular in light of the Supreme Court's recent rulings on what the current powers of the federal government are in that area?
Certainly concerning with respect to the court's ruling on regulations, but we passed what was a significant bill in the Inflation Reduction Act, which will help cut emissions by 30% by the end of the next decade, which is an important benchmark. But we've got a lot of work to do. We're seeing the impacts of climate change in our own state. We see it on the ski industry and other important parts of our economy. We had twin storms in January that were incredibly devastating along New Hampshire's coast. So we've also worked to make sure that New Hampshire is prepared to build resilient infrastructure and to be able to adapt to a changing climate, while we also focus on what we need to do to lower emissions and spur renewable energy development. There's significant promise in terms of offshore wind development that could power millions of homes and businesses in New England, just off our coastline. But it is a new industry, and we have to figure out how we're able to build the portside infrastructure we need, and develop the workforce and expertise in that industry to be able to deploy it and connect. We also have a lot of work to do with respect to our grid to upgrade and modernize it so that it can carry some of these at-scale renewable energy projects that are being proposed, and continue to see the development of things like large-scale solar, which are really important. Also included in the Inflation Reduction Act are tax credits for homes and businesses to be able to weatherize and become more energy efficient, install things like heat pumps, And so that's an important step to make sure the incentives are in the right place for this transition to happen. But, people out there are really hungry for leadership and for action on this. And I hope that what we were able to do in that bill is just one of many steps that we will be taking in the near future. And again, the news of the last week or so is just all the evidence we need. These powerful hurricanes that appear out of nowhere and all of a sudden are Category 5 that leave meteorologists scratching their heads. It's time to realize that we have an ability to change the trajectory that we're on and adapt. And I personally feel like the cost of doing nothing far exceeds the cost of the kind of investments that we need to make to be responsible about how we protect our planet and environment.
Just a little related, because you mentioned infrastructure investments. What do you think is the next things the federal government should be doing, particularly not just with private actors, but with the state government, to improve roads and power distribution and things like that?
Yeah. Well, we get a pretty bad grade from the American Society of Civil Engineers. In their last report card, I think it was 3 years ago, we were like a D+ in New Hampshire for our stormwater infrastructure, for instance. I think we were in the C category for a number of other forms of infrastructure. So we've got a huge backlog that we've just begun to address in terms of rebuilding for the future and modernizing what we've got. I think of my own city here in Manchester, and I think Nashua is in a similar situation where we've got aging stormwater and sewer infrastructure, and the price tag on that is going to be hundreds of millions of dollars to modernize what we have today to serve the needs of our residents and businesses and keep the environment safe and prevent, say, discharge of sewage overflow into the Merrimack River. So there are a number of frontiers here that we've got to continue to focus on. What we should think about is the 5-year program of the bipartisan infrastructure law will be up in just another year and a half. And so the next Congress will need to think about what's working and where we can go for the future. And I think it's both about making sure that we can fund some of these historically high levels of investment in things like transportation infrastructure, water and wastewater, and also how we get the benefits out there to communities. Because I hear a lot of cities and towns around New Hampshire that may not have full-time grant writers, that can't take full advantage of some of the discretionary grants that are contained in the bill. And so they get, outmaneuvered by larger municipalities and counties around the country that have the capacity to be able to apply for these funds. And so thinking about how we create greater equity and make sure that the benefits are there, not just for big communities, but for communities of all size, including disadvantaged communities, is going to be really important, I think, in the next phase of this.
Can you talk about border security and in particular the northern border?
Well, it's an important question, and I am a supporter of the legislation that's been developed in the Senate by Senator Murphy and Lankford, a Democrat and a very conservative Republican, that got together on investments in border security, creating greater order along our southern border by providing resources, better technology, and I think a lot of those steps are common sense. Including reforms to the asylum system, so we don't have people waiting 5 years before their case is heard by a judge. So there are a number of common sense steps that we can take, but Congress has to have the ability to act. And right now we face a situation where, unfortunately, the Speaker won't allow that bill or other bipartisan bills on immigration, like ones I've introduced, to be able to come to the floor. The northern border is an issue. We've seen over the last 15 years or so, a huge ramp up in the number of illegal crossings in our sector. Most of those are in upstate New York, very few in New Hampshire. But in talking with law enforcement, there are real issues about how they have the right communication equipment and the right level of manpower and woman power in terms of our border patrol along the northern border. Some of that has been diverted to deal with the crisis at the southern border. And so making sure that they're well funded is important. We've introduced legislation with Republican colleagues to create a joint operations center somewhere along the northern border, hopefully in this Swanton sector that New Hampshire's in, to help share best practices in terms of training for law enforcement, foster better communication, and to help develop better strategies with respect to securing the northern border too. With respect to immigration, though, largely we've got to get to a point where we have an opportunity to reform our broken immigration system and create legal pathways for folks to come into this country to achieve their American dream and to participate in our economic life. That's really important for our business climate, but it's also important in terms of our values. We have a number of young people in our country who know no other country than the United States, but do not have legal status. And so that's why I support a bill called the DREAM Act that would allow these people who are part of our American family to earn their citizenship and to be full-fledged Americans too. And so we need to think about other ways that we can repair a system that hasn't been set up for success here, that has resulted in the humanitarian crisis that we see along our border and security challenges as well. And the only way we can do that is by folks being willing to work together and try to put the politics to the side, not demonize immigrants, and focus on how we can solve a problem.
Well, Representative Pappas, we really appreciate your being here with us and talking with us. We appreciate your service to your constituents and to the country, and good luck with the rest of your day.
Okay. Nice to see everyone. Take care.
And we are welcoming Maggie Goodlander.
Hi, Rabbi. Good morning.
Hello. We're just getting our spotlight situation set up. And so on behalf of the Southern New Hampshire Jewish Men's Club, I want to welcome Maggie Goodlander, who is the Democratic Party's nominee for the U.S. Congress to be representative for the 2nd District in New Hampshire. And thank you for spending a half an hour with us this morning. And the format, so you'll know, and again, to remind everybody, is we got about a half an hour together. You can spend up to half of that just telling us whatever you would like to tell us. And then my role is primarily to convey questions that are being submitted through the chat. So please, and submit them from scratch, even if you've written them to other candidates, so I know that these are the ones you'd like to ask. And how would you like to be addressed, by the way, for Ms. Goodlander? Yeah.
Oh, no, please, Maggie.
Maggie, to address questions you'd like me to pass along to Maggie. And so welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I'm really grateful to all of you, to the Southern New Hampshire Jewish Men's Club, for inviting me to be with you on a Sunday morning on Zoom. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that everyone who observed Yom Kippur had a meaningful fast and a good day with loved ones. For those of you who I don't know, I just thought I'd say a few words about who I am and what brings me to this race. And this morning, I can begin at the beginning. I was born on Election Day in Nashua, and my mom, Betty, was serving in the State House at the time. She went into labor, and she went directly to Broad Street Elementary School to vote before she went to St. Joe's Hospital to give birth to me. And that is very much the spirit in which I was raised. My parents both believed deeply in public service. My dad always said he got his education in the United States Navy, and I was really proud to follow in his footsteps. I served 11 years as an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserve. And one of the things I learned in the Navy, it's a skill that I think would serve anyone well at any level of government. And particularly, it's important for the United States Congress. I developed the skill to be able to mute out the noise, to focus on the mission, and to work with people who I might not agree with on much of anything apart from the important mission in front of us. And that is the spirit I've brought to the work I've done throughout my life. I've had the opportunity to work in all 3 branches of our government. The first job I had out of high school, actually, I was a summer intern for Congressman Tom Lantos, who was the only Holocaust survivor to ever serve in the United States Congress. And the time I spent with him, I just fell in love with the House of Representatives. It's a chaotic place. It's a very human place, but it's a place that I still believe good work can be done and must be done for a country. So my first job out of college, I went to the United States Senate, and I had the opportunity to work on a bipartisan basis on a number of pieces of legislation that have continued to mean a lot to me throughout my career. Early on, I worked for Senator Joe Lieberman and Senator John McCain. So I worked on both sides of the aisle and always on a bipartisan basis. I worked with Senator Lieberman and McCain on two pieces of landmark sanctions legislation. One was designed to impose accountability on Vladimir Putin and his regime, and this was 10 years before the most recent invasion of Ukraine. Today, I am banned from Russia for life as a result of much of that work and work I later did at the Justice Department. We worked on a bipartisan basis to advance comprehensive Iran sanctions legislation. And this is at a time when there was a bipartisan, bicameral, really a supermajority in the United States Congress that was able to come together and take important action like that landmark piece of Iran sanctions legislation. I believe that what I saw in these experiences was that a small but dedicated group of members of Congress who are willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work actually can get a lot done, even amidst a real perception of deadlock. I was proud to serve for much of the Biden-Harris administration at the Justice Department and at the White House. And at the Justice Department, I worked for the Attorney General and in the Antitrust Division, where I was really laser focused on three sectors of our very consolidated economy: agriculture, housing, and healthcare. And, what I found in that job was actually a lot of our allies in Congress were working on a bipartisan basis and in partnership with people who they'd never worked with before. So, Senator Amy Klobuchar was a close partner to many of her colleagues on the Senate Judiciary Committee, who I found to be sometimes quite surprising. Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Josh Hawley. I think what it speaks to is when it comes to our consumer protection and antitrust laws, this too is an area where no matter where you lie on the ideological spectrum, it's a deeply American idea that no corporation is above the law. And I was really proud to be a part of enforcing our antitrust laws. And I hope very much for the opportunity to represent our district and our state in Congress and update those laws, some of which haven't been updated in more than a century. I'll leave you with this. The job I left to come run for the seat was at the White House. I was leading the Biden-Harris administration's unity agenda. And it's an agenda that doesn't get a lot of attention these days, but it was an agenda that did a lot of good, I think, and focused on issues that I hear about every single day on the campaign trail: the opioid epidemic, our mental health crisis here in New Hampshire and across the country, fulfilling our sacred obligation to veterans, holding big tech companies accountable, including to keep our kids safe online, and ending cancer as we know it. So the basic idea behind this agenda, which touched 5 very wide-ranging areas of American public life, was that we can still come together as Democrats and Republicans to tackle the challenges that unite us as Americans. And it may sound like an old-fashioned idea, but it's one I think that the future of our democracy and our country depends on deeply. So that's the spirit that has animated the work I've tried to do. It's what I very much hope to be able to do in Congress. And I really look forward to your questions, because I'll tell you, being a candidate for Congress has been an energizing and optimistic experience, because here in New Hampshire, no one does democracy better than we do in the country. And I'm really eager to hear what's on your minds and what's in your hearts, and to begin a conversation. So, Rabbi, if it's okay with you, I would love to open it up for questions.
Absolutely. So, and please, people, keep the questions coming. And so we'll go really in no particular topical order. Where are we? I guess that's also means sort of where would you be in terms of the Capital Corridor commuter project linking us with Massachusetts?
Well, this is a huge priority. I think we all see the acute need for commuter rail, especially in southern New Hampshire, but across the district. I was in Lebanon yesterday, learning more about what that city has done to help build up public transportation including in rural stretches of the Upper Valley. And, what I would say is we had a bipartisan infrastructure law that presented real opportunities for federal funding, and we've got to jump on every opportunity we can. The way I see this job, it's an advocacy job, in which we've got to be creative and flexible. We know we're going to need the resources to be able to advance this project and the buy-in from the relevant stakeholders in the federal government. But one thing I can tell you is I will be laser focused on finding the opportunities, the federal funding streams, wherever they might lie, and work with everything I've got to get this done. Because, I'm a lawyer by training, but in my heart, I'm an advocate. I learned to be a lawyer in New Hampshire family court, in New Hampshire drug court, fighting for voting rights. And what I learned are the skills, I think, that of advocacy that are required to advance and get off across the finish line a project like this, which I know many people over the course of many years have worked hard on. But I'm coming in with fresh eyes and a real commitment to get this across the finish line.
I'm waiting for more questions to come in, so I'll ask you one kind of in my formulation. And for many of us in the Jewish community, our hearts are with wanting to see all of the hostages, certainly those we're connected with by the Jewish community and our Israel connections, and the other Americans and everybody still hostages home. We would like to see an end to death and an enduring peace. And these are short, very short, and also very long-term things. What do you think is particularly the role of a congressperson, of one of 435, in advancing any of these things, and where would you be putting your efforts, toward what things and in what ways?
Well, thank you for that question, Rabbi. I mentioned that early in my career, I worked in the United States Congress. I worked for Congressman Tom Lantos on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I worked for Senators Lieberman and McCain on the Senate Armed Services Committee. And, I had the opportunity as a staff person to travel to over 90 countries on a bipartisan basis, including nearly a dozen trips to Israel and to the region. And what I saw was that Congress has a really important role to play in American foreign policy. And I think in particular, when it comes to partnerships like the one between the United States and Israel, Congress is an important enduring through line in these bilateral and deeply rooted relationships. I think we've seen that administrations change, both we have an opportunity to elect a new president every 4 years. We've seen in the last 8 years 2 different administrations. And I believe that members of Congress, including members like Senator Jeanne Shaheen, who I hope one day will be the first woman to be the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, can play a real role in developing these relationships across the board. But what I'd say, look, October 7th was the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And I can't feel anything other than heartbreak seeing innocent lives being lost, Israeli and Palestinian both. But, we had a ceasefire on October 6, 2023. Hamas broke that ceasefire. And I believe that the path ahead is one that the United States, both the Biden-Harris administration, but also like-minded members of Congress who want to be a part of the solution, can help advance the path towards a return of the hostages who have been kept in unimaginably brutal circumstances now for more than a year, to surge humanitarian assistance into Gaza, which is much needed, and to bring an end to this war. And I believe that the cause of peace is one that can and should continue to unite members of Congress. And I believe Congress can play a productive role in helping to end this conflict.
So in a different direction, energy costs and the role of different sources of energy and other things that might lower energy costs. What are your main approaches that you would want to be supporting and signing on to?
So, we've got some of the highest energy costs here in New Hampshire in the United States of America. And what my hope is, I think we've seen in the last 3 years a real surge in federal funding streams to help build up a clean energy economy, which creates jobs, which ultimately lowers energy costs, and which helps us to confront one of the existential crises of our time, the climate crisis. It's a win-win-win across the board. The Inflation Reduction Act delivered mission critical resources to help put us on the path towards developing and sustaining a clean energy economy. But my hope is that 2 years from now, we'll be able to look back and see that New Hampshire and the United States of America more broadly is the clean energy superpower of the world. And I believe New Hampshire can be at the forefront of that. I see in Nashua, I had the opportunity to visit a solar farm. This is the future, and it's when you think about how we're able to harness opportunity, jobs, lower energy costs, in addressing an existential crisis like the climate crisis. To me, this is a really exciting and important set of initiatives that we're going to have to get Congress continuing to provide the funding necessary to make this all a reality. We don't need to look far. We've seen the destruction and the death, just heartbreaking, from the recent hurricanes in North Carolina and in Florida. But as I've traveled around the district here in New Hampshire, we're not immune from these events. I was in Keene a few weeks ago where a microburst caused more than $1 million of damage and left hundreds of families to have to repair major damage to their homes or having lost their homes. We're not immune from the impacts of this crisis, and we have a real opportunity, which I want to be a part of helping to seize.
Do you have any ideas related to federal help to make education stronger in the state, particularly? And that could be everything from the support that students need, or investing in teachers, or helping the other things in terms of standards and outcomes.
Yeah, from where I sit, what I've seen is that we've got, as I've talked to teachers and students across the district, we're at a moment where public education is really under genuine threat and attack in this country. It's become a mainstream position that the United States Department of Education should be eliminated, which to me is such a radical position to take, and one that won't serve any of us well. I think there's the proper role of the federal government when it comes to public education really is to help support through critical funding streams to help enforce basic principles of our Constitution. I teach constitutional law at Dartmouth and at UNH. And to me, the federal Constitution has a lot to say about equal protection, and that applies to all of us, including to our kids. It's that basic idea of equal protection that led Congress in 1975 to pass the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. And that's a really important statute, one that Congress committed to fund our schools, our public schools, at a particular level which it is chronically underfunded. And this has had real implications right here in New Hampshire in the second district. I've talked with teachers and administrators who have helped make real to me the true impact of Congress's underfunding under just this particular statute, IDEA. I was speaking with an administrator in Pembroke who told me that 27 teachers and administrators had to be laid off as a result of Congress's underfunding. So what I can tell you is I will bring a real commitment and rigor to ensuring that Congress meets its commitments to fund our public schools, our teachers and students alike, and that I believe the Department of Education, no, like any other part of government, it's not perfect, but it's a very important bedrock institution that will help enable our students and our teachers to do what government should be doing, which is to provide a good education. So these are my values on this issue. And I believe that government's a team sport too. And so I've had great conversations with legislators and executive counselors about ways that we can improve the federal government's role in this team sport when it comes to public education. So thank you for that question, Rabbi.
Sure. We have a question about the border, which is the borders, which have been a big issue for a long time. And so what are the proposals or the actions that you think are important for the federal government to be taking, if any, related to border security and people being able to come across the border, and then particularly as relates to our northern border and our New Hampshire border?
So, look, when you read the Constitution, it makes it really clear that Congress has a responsibility over our immigration laws, and that includes our border security laws as well. We're a nation of immigrants. My great-grandfather came to this country from northern Greece, escaped violence in northern Greece. He came through Ellis Island, got a job as a dishwasher at a hotel in New York City. He didn't speak a word of English. He learned enough English to negotiate for a better wage and made his way to Nashua, where he built a farm, and I was lucky to grow up down the road from the farm he built. That was all possible because we had immigration laws on the books and a system that was funded to meet that moment. But what we have now is a chronically underfunded system that and laws that have not been updated in far too long. So, that's why early in my career, I was really proud to go to the United States Senate. One of the other big pieces of legislation I was proud to work on was a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform and border security bill. And this was back in 2013. It was an effort led by Senator Chuck Schumer and Senator John McCain, who I was working for at the time. And no one thought that this bill could make its way through the United States Senate. But we worked really hard. We did what we had to do to find consensus on the biggest issues. We passed that bill through the United States Senate. And one of my early heartbreaks in government was seeing it not make its way across the finish line in the House of Representatives. But that bill has continued to be a framework for reform for the future when it comes to both of the issues you raised, Rabbi, border security and updating our immigration system and immigration reform. So what I'd say is, we have a bipartisan bill that really used the bill that I was proud to work on as its basis, that has been with the help of a very conservative Republican and a Democrat, came together in the Senate once again to try to get this immigration reform and border security across the finish line. That bill didn't get signed into law for one reason, and that is former President Trump concluded that it was not in his personal political interest to see immigration reform succeed in this country. So to me, that is just it's dead wrong. It's something that we've got to work, to continue to work to get across the finish line. And here in New Hampshire, I think that the issues that we're confronting at the northern border and at the southern border have some important differences. When it comes to the southern border, one of the really important pieces, parts of that comprehensive immigration reform and border security bill that President Biden and Vice President Harris are eager to sign into law was funding critical technology at our southern border that will help to curb and bring an end to the flow of deadly drugs across our official ports of entry. Today we're seeing overdose deaths in New Hampshire that are resulting from deadly drugs that are flowing across our official ports of entry. We need to fund the technology at the border to bring an end to that. This bill would have also helped to fund a system in which we need to keep our northern border protected. When I was at the Justice Department, one of the big initiatives that we undertook was what we called the Cross-Border Crime Forum, a detailed cooperation with our partners on the other side of the northern border in Canada to really address the root causes of cross-border crime and violations of the law that we could work on a cooperative basis to ensure we can bring to an end. But my view is we've got to fund the system that's going to allow us to have the resources we need at the northern border and at the southern border, and that's going to fund the core pillars of our immigration system. We've got 92 immigration courts in this country that the Justice Department administers, and they have been year after year chronically underfunded. And that's why we have a system in which justice really can't be delivered. So this is something I care about deeply and want to continue to work on in Congress because the Constitution couldn't be clearer. We've got an obligation to do that.
As a lawyer, do you think there should be changes related to the Supreme Court, such as term limits or the number of justices?
I was a law clerk to Justice Stephen Breyer, and before that, I was a law clerk to then Chief Judge Merrick Garland on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals in Washington. And I learned a lot being a law clerk on the Supreme Court. One of the things that really surprised me about being there, I've worked in a lot of different parts of our government. The United States Supreme Court is really one of the only institutions in our government that doesn't have a binding code of conduct and ethics that Congress has set forth. Again, the Constitution says that the justices of the Supreme Court get to keep their jobs on an important condition, and that's the condition of good behavior. Those are the words the document uses, good behavior. We've seen a lot of bad behavior on the part of Supreme Court justices, and my own view is that it is past time for Congress to pass a binding code of conduct and ethics to apply to the United States Supreme Court. This is something I believe in deeply because, I believe that any institution of government should not be self-policing itself. I don't think that this undermines the Supreme Court's independence. I think it will strengthen it because, look, the Supreme Court used to be the most trusted and respected institution in American public life, and today it is one of the least trusted and least respected. That is itself a threat to the rule of law. So Congress should do something about that. When it comes to term limits, my own view is that term limits are good government. There's no reason that, any justice of the Supreme Court should be serving in their job for as long as I've been alive. But that's the reality that we are living in now. I believe the term limits are good government, and an 18-year term limit, which happens to be the amount of time that Justice David Souter of New Hampshire served on the Supreme Court. 18 years is an amount of time that constitutional scholars and lawyers from across the ideological spectrum agree is a sensible amount of time to limit a Supreme Court justice's term of service. So, I believe deeply that when Congress has a role to play, it's part of our basic system of checks and balances in really bringing some important baseline guardrails and reforms around how the Supreme Court operates. And I think anyone who wants to see, we need a Supreme Court that the American public can really believe in and trust in. And what we see clearly now is that there's been a true loss in trust. And I believe we can restore that by just creating some basic guardrails around how the court operates.
Well, thank you. And Maggie Goodlander, thank you so much for taking this half hour to spend with us. And thank you for your service so far up till now. And good luck with your day going ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi. And thank you all for the opportunity to be with you. Have a great day.
Yeah. And we are welcoming Russell Prescott. And
my video. There it is. Hello there.
Hello. Here we go. So welcome on behalf of the Southern New Hampshire Jewish Men's Club to this morning of conversations with candidates for office. And you are running for as the Republican nominee for the U.S. Congress in the 1st District. And my first question is just how would you like to be addressed? You've held other roles. I like to use people's titles if that's how you like to be.
Oh, it's Russell. That's it. Russell, well, it is.
So I am this is not just so you'll know about our forum. It is I'm here really to be a moderator to facilitate your being able to talk and to respond to questions that are being submitted to me. If I throw a question in of my own, I will identify that as my question, and we appreciate this chance to connect and hopefully build a relationship as a Jewish community with you should you be elected to serve. So we've got about half an hour together, and you can spend up to half of that if you like, just telling us whatever you'd like to, and then we'll address our questions to you.
Well, sounds great. I will not drag on, I hope, and make sure that you understand who I am. And I've grew up here in New Hampshire. My mom and dad, they came from Quincy and moved up to New Hampshire in 1950s, early 1950s. My father started a business in 1954 in Exeter. It's called R.E. Prescott. My dad's name was Robert Elmer, and we're wholesale supply, still in business, and it's being run now by my 3 oldest children. So it's a 3rd generation business here in Exeter. I live in Kingston, where I'm here in my garage speaking with you. And so during that time that my father moved up to New Hampshire, started his business, I was born 6 years later. He came up with really just his car and $3,500 I heard when I was growing up, and he started his business. And in that time frame, just between when he moved to New Hampshire to the 1960, he was wintering in Florida, and he owned a home in St. Petersburg. So I was born in Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, which has just been nailed by 2 different hurricanes. So it's dear to my heart what's going on in Florida. My 2 oldest sisters are living down there, and they're still not going back to their homes yet. It's working in process. So when I was growing up here in Exeter, New Hampshire, I learned of my family's history. My aunt was a daughter of the American Revolution, and she taught me about how my father, worked at the naval shipyard during World War II. And also my grandfather was in the Navy in the turn of the century. And also my 6th great grandfather was living here in Raymond, New Hampshire. And he gave his life for the state and the country at the Battle of Bunker Hill. So I learned those things from my aunt, who was very heavily involved with the Daughters of the American Revolution. And during my high school years, we would winter in Florida, back and forth. And when it came to my junior high years, my sister and I said, why can't we just stay here and not, winter in Florida and disrupt our schooling? So we stayed here for those junior high years and my high school years, when I met my wife my future wife, I should say, in 1976 at Exeter High School. And we married after she was in college and I was in college. I went to college in Florida and she went to college at UNH. And after we were apart for a couple of years, we decided that we ought to get married. And I finished my schooling after being married in 1982, finished my schooling at the University of South Florida with a mechanical engineering degree. It fit in with what the business was and is. It's a wholesale supply and engineering for water systems. I have been a professional engineer for 30 years and with a great record there, never a blemish on my record of designing water systems all around New England. And then also during that time of being, posed with many difficulties and problems, I was able to develop products that would meet the needs of the industry. And I have 7 patents, and we have been manufacturing our own equipment there in New Hampshire, in Exeter. We have about 50 employees, and those patents are for removing arsenic and radon from water, which is a very big problem here in New Hampshire. And I feel that for the last I'd say 25 years, those patents have been saving people's water, cleaning up people's water so their lives would be more healthy. And so it's kind of a real high point for me is having an award of a patent and multiple ones is pretty much a landmark of what made R.E. Prescott Company a larger company, where we're distributing all over New England now and even in the country. And I've just made one of my best salespeople into our national sales manager, and he'll start that in much more rigorous work next year. So I'm still managing the company. My brother and I were partners for about 40 years, and he retired in 2020. And I took over the company. I own the company outright, and like as I mentioned, my 3 oldest children and a couple of managers as well are running the company for the day-to-day business. Also during that time, I was part of the Exeter Chamber of Commerce. Served for a year on the board of directors of the Exeter Area Chamber of Commerce. Still a member of Rotary, and also ran for state senate when New Hampshire was going to get an income tax, and I ran against Maggie actually against the income tax, and I won in a Democrat leaning district. And I learned early on in campaigning that the pundits and the professionals of running for political office like to use negative campaigning, and I went along with it. I really did. And that was early on in my, maybe 20 years ago, that I was, trying to be the best negative campaigner possible. But, it's not a lasting solution. Even if you do happen to win, it's fleeting because you leave behind hard feelings. And so for the last 20 years, I've been running positive campaigns and making sure that when I do get into office, I get into office with integrity, and therefore what happened in 2010 was I served for 10 years straight, 6 years in the state Senate, 4 years on the executive council, just trying to do as best I can for the state and running positive campaigns and actually winning in, Democrat leaning districts, winning in years when we had a backlash against President Trump in 2018, and we lost the House and the Senate, and I was able to win in Rockingham County in that seat for the executive council. I feel that it's most important this time of year, every year, to treat others the way you'd like to be treated. But it really comes to a head when it's the political season. I think people forget that best to be trying to build better relationships and friendships than it is to have a negative campaign. So I've worked hard to not do that, and that's it's been my this campaign has been one that's not negative. I'm just going to be working on the subjects of what I'd like to get done if I get to Washington, D.C. And those are very simple. We need to balance our budget. I don't think that we can do a balancing of budget as quick as I did when I was in the state Senate. We had an $800 million deficit one year, and that was 1% of our GDP. The deficit spending that we have nationally is about 6% of our GDP, and it may take longer than one term to bring the budget deficit down so we can get a balanced budget. But you need to act, and we need to act quickly. It's escalating to the point where in the last 4 years, our national debt has gone up 50%, and we can't afford to have that go on, especially since it increases inflation. And we're still at, a pretty high in terms of what the inflation rate is earmarked for the Federal Reserve. They want to get it down to 2%, and that's so important, and that takes fiscal discipline. And I think that's what's missing in Washington, and that's one of my biggest priorities. And the other, of course, is to enforce our laws for immigration that we've had on the books now, with whether it's a Democrat administration or a Republican administration. We need to enforce our laws and make sure that we bring in and streamline our laws as well. Bring in people that are ready to go to work. Individuals like myself who have 50 employees, we're always looking for people that are ready and have good expertise to get to work. And if we can streamline our immigration process and not have such a backlog in those people that are trying to become citizens of our United States, we should do that, because we do need our economy to thrive with good people coming into our country. And the other issue is energy independence. We need to get back to that, and that's going to help our economy thrive. And when we talk about the national debt and the budget deficit, if we have a better GDP every year, that whittles away at the deficit of 6%. If we have a 2% growth, 3% growth, and continue to go there, that's an easier way that revenue increase on their own without raising taxes, and we can get to a balanced budget with fiscal discipline to cut spending where we can. And so that's a little bit about myself, and I'm so happy to speak with you, except I didn't mention my family. I've mentioned a family business, but I've been married now for 42 years to the girl I met in 1976 at Exeter High School. And we have 5 children. They're all married, and we have 8 grandchildren. So that drives me, as well as my history of, my 6th great grandfather giving his life for this state and this country. It drives me to want to give my life back, as I always have, to public service, and make New Hampshire have a good representative in Washington, D.C. that's looking out for them.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah, so I'm going to be asking you questions that come from the group here, but I'm going to start with one of my own. A lot of us, have just been together for many days over the past couple of weeks in the Jewish High Holy Days, and we've had the privilege exercising our religious freedom of tending to ourselves and also our own Jewish community needs, and we're very tied to Israel in all kinds of ways. In the group today are people, everything from dual Israeli citizens to people with families and family members right on the front lines in the conflict, or in the reach of the terrible weapons and hostages, Jewish and Israeli and American and otherwise. And so we have that tie, and also we are Americans, and many of us, the belief in the importance of the many dimensions of the Israeli-American relationship for the United States and for us as citizens of this place, where our primary, obviously, citizenship allegiances are. And I'm just wondering how you're thinking about the conflict as it's going on now and the long term, and what the role of a congressman is in both bringing an end to the war that has taken so many lives already right now, and for promoting and enduring peace and stability that will be good for also be good for America. What do you think you could do related to those things?
I think that when you look at what happened to our United States back in 2011, I believe it was, but it's 9/11. If you just think of that, how we were attacked and how we were, supported by the world to bring those who had done the offense of attacking our country. We went and made sure we brought them to justice. This is the same feelings that I have concerning the attacks that occurred to Israel and the fact that they took hostages and so many lives were lost. Those need to come to justice, and that is what is taking place today. And I am in full support of what's happening, as Israel was in full support of us during our time of bringing certain individuals and groups to justice. The same must be done. We stand with Israel in their work to bring forward justice. And they're still being attacked, and we have to recognize that this is not an offensive that was taken up by Israel. This was something in reaction, and we need to support that just as we reacted to the invasion of our country on 9/11.
So switching to a different direction, the role of a congressman is different from both your business, excuse me, your business role and also the government roles that you've had so far. So what do you think are the key differences between the leadership roles you've played so far and what it would be to be a congressperson?
The key differences? Well, I think the biggest difference is that New Hampshire is so ingrained with balancing their budget that they do it every single year. Yes, it's a biannual budget, but it's a balanced budget for each year. That is something that's missing. In fact, it's written into our law in the federal government as I think it was back in 1974. It was called the Budget Act, and we have 12 different subcommittees that work on making sure that we balance our budget. Those 12 different subcommittees work on different segments of our government, and we should work very hard at those subcommittee levels. And it's in a time frame where you start in the early parts of 2025. We're supposed to start. It starts with having a budget brought forward by the president early in the year, and those time frames have been lapsed or pushed back. We need to take a strong stand, something that I did not have to do in New Hampshire in the state Senate. It happened naturally. The leadership was very diligent. The governor was very diligent on doing their part to move the process forward so that by the first year of the biennium, by June, we were really under the crunch to get that that budget passed in a balanced way. I don't believe that we're going to get to a balanced budget in the first year that I'm there. If I'm so honored to be there, I think we'll take a while to get there. But if we can stick to the fiscal discipline of adhering to the law, if we have good leadership in the House and the Senate to make sure that happens, and then if we have a president that actually brings forward, a very good effort to bring forward a budget, that's hopefully what I can bring to Washington, D.C. The discipline to get that done is the same as I did in the state Senate.
Do you think that Medicare and Social Security are fiscally stable? And if they're not, what will it take in the immediate term to accomplish that?
Yeah, that it's not stable. It's underfunded and it's expiring, or it's due to be in a bankruptcy state. They say in 10 years, and that's always a moving target. Might be earlier, might be later. However, as I mentioned about fiscal discipline, if we can't balance our budget, we won't be able to afford to, quote unquote, bail out the Social Security. So that's the most important thing. We've made so many promises to those who are just before retirement or into retirement that we need to make sure that we keep those promises without any changes to the commitments that we've made to all the people of America. and especially here at home. And I also think that our cost of living adjustments are inadequate. They are not keeping up with the actual cost of living here in New Hampshire. And therefore, we have to be even more strict on that process of those 12 subcommittees. When I was in the state Senate, we always measured each of the line items of spending, and that was measured by what is our needs for our state and what are our wants. And we tried to divide those to a point where we were able to balance the budget without raising taxes. Raising taxes will harm our economy, and we have that going on next year. We have an expiration of the tax cuts that were implemented in 2017. If we do not stand and say we don't want an income tax of another 3% on every individual here in New Hampshire, the tax rates will go up from 12% to 15% in one of the brackets. Then the higher bracket is 22%, will go up to 25%. And that's a 3% income tax on the people of New Hampshire. It's not going to be good when people are already struggling to make ends meet. And that's one of the reasons that I need to get down there, make sure I get into those subcommittee roles and take care of the needs of our country without the wants, so we can make sure we keep up with the cost of living and keep our promises to Medicare. That's important, and Social Security.
There are a lot of high-tech businesses in New Hampshire, including recent advances in biomedical technology. And how would you think of trying to encourage that continued development, and in what ways that would be appropriate, that are good for the nation, serving in the National Congress, that are also good for, or particularly good for New Hampshire?
Yes, again, it harkens right back to the difficulties that I had for the last 3 or 4 years when we had the lowest unemployment rate in the nation, and trying to find help that would come in and be able to work and provide a good service. It was even difficult to say, all right, let's come on in for an interview, and we hope to speak with you, and that wouldn't even happen. It's because we have too little workforce, and we need a lot more. And I think that all has to do with our immigration policies. We know that it takes too long to, get your green card, or even after you get your green card, to become a citizen. I believe that these things should be fast-tracked, and they would help cut down on the urgency of everyone trying to come illegally if they know that there's an opportunity that within a reasonable amount of time, that if they just follow the law, they can come here, be welcomed here, and we solve a problem with making sure that the biomedical industry or the water treatment systems industry that I'm in will have a good workforce to work with and keep our economy rolling.
Do specific ideas related to global warming, and if you think that there are the next steps in U.S. policy that haven't worked themselves out yet?
The next steps in the federal policy, I don't have a particular item that I would like to talk about there, because it's not something that's been the quickest thing to my mind when I'm running for office. But I want to say, in my history as a state senator, making sure that whenever we had an opportunity to keep the data, to understand the impact of the global changes that we see, to make sure that we are preparing for those. Every single time I was the chairman of energy, as well as the chairman of commerce. And every single time I voted for those, following the science, making sure that we're prepared. Simple things like monitoring sea level rise, and then having ability to say, all right, if it does happen, what is the way that we can make sure our state is safe, and how would we protect our crucial coastline.
You mentioned about family members in the line of the hurricanes, and I just I apologize for not earlier expressing our hopes that they'll be okay. And in terms of kind of the picture of that and in government, how do you think about FEMA, and is it have the is it sort of equipped and set up in the ways that it ought to be? And if not, are there things that ought to be changed about how it works or how it's funded?
Sure. We have an obligation with these 10 million illegal immigrants that have come into our country. We have an obligation there to be humanitarian aid, but we can't let it sacrifice the opportunity or the needs that we have when these hurricanes run right through people's houses. My sister's house had been handed down by my father, who bought it in 1970, and it's not one of those that is on a stilts, right? If it was modern day, we would have built them higher. But this home that was part of the family and she owns had 4 feet of water, water over the doorknobs. It was unreal. Never happened in all this time since 1970 that we'd ever had that type of situation happen. And then to have that, the circumstances that are rampant there's thousands and thousands of people that live in Pinellas County, and not have the support from FEMA, I think is something that just goes to show where if we're continuing to run on our budget process is a continuing resolution, it's not addressing the details of the underfunding of FEMA. It's not addressing those details. We have to account for the more work that they have to do with illegal immigration happening as fast as it did. So be able to, and therefore be able to help with aid for these natural atrocities that happen. Yeah. So that's, again, the budget process. We need to look at it, look at square in the face and say, we need the money to fund these things.
You were making some reference to energy before also, and both, I think there's a cost side, which is the high costs of energy, particularly in New Hampshire for energy. And then are there particular energy development opportunities that are especially suitable, you think, for New Hampshire and could be catalyzed through Congress?
Yeah, certainly. The all of the above is what's been mentioned quite often. We need to make sure that we continue with those renewable resources and make sure that they are efficient and economical to get done. But also the latest is smaller nuclear power plants, and they're very safe if they can be brought into different areas of our country. That would aid as well. And that is something that I would say, again, everything that we can do to lower the cost of energy, including more refining of our own oil here in America. It's better for our environment than having refineries outside of our country, because our refineries are under much stricter air quality rules than outside of our country. If we can go back to having all the refineries working again here in America, would drive down the cost of energy as well. Everyone has felt the pinch. When you look at 3 years ago, your electric bill, it was a kilowatt hour cost that is 30% less than what it is today. That is real impact on people's monthly income. And to add, just to harken back to the income tax that's going to be raised by 3%, that's going to impact everybody's monthly income as well. So I think it all ties together in terms of fiscal responsibility, weighing our wants and our needs, and making sure we the needs are our energy independence, and our wants have to be not funded.
As an engineer, do you think that gives you something particular to bring to the congressional role, or add something that maybe other people you'd be collaborating with don't have?
Well, certainly when I think about my 30 years as a professional engineer, I'm so happy that I'm in an industry where people have a great deal of trust in. People drive on their roads, they cross their bridges, and I received a call from another congressman who's going to come up and visit Westerman, I believe his name is, and he's a professional engineer, and he called me specifically because I was the nominee for the Republican Party. He says, we need more engineers down in Washington, D.C. They think differently than some people down here, and I think that's exactly true. There are many times when I draw on the side of my brain that is mathematic, that is scientific, and it helps me make decisions that some others don't see as quickly, and probably I can help influence people in a way that says, well, this is a little bit more pragmatic discussion than an emotional discussion. So I'm not as emotional, I should say. Maybe that might be a difference.
Well, we want to thank you, Russell Prescott, for spending time with us this morning. We want to thank you for your public service so far, and your service to the communities, and a good luck in the rest of your day.
Well, terrific. Great being here. Thank you for everybody. God bless you all.
Thank you. And we are welcoming Lily Tang Williams. Have I said your name correctly?
Correct. Lily Tang Williams, Tang Dynasty, like in China's history.
And I'm Rabbi John Spira-Savett at Temple Beth Abraham, and so this is my first chance to say hello to you. Welcome on behalf of the Southern New Hampshire Jewish Men's Club, and for spending this half an hour with us. How do you like to be addressed, as Ms. Williams?
And Lily is fine. Everybody calls me Lily. Some people call me Lily Tang, but I like to tell people Tang actually was my Chinese last name, and I'm married to a Texas man, so I use Williams. So when you add a Lily Tang Williams, and my last name is Williams, but having Tang there, I'm the only one on Google. So Lily Tang Williams, there's only one in the whole world. It make it easy to find.
Well, welcome. We're glad that you set aside some time. You are the nominee of the Republican Party to represent the 2nd District of New Hampshire in the U.S. Congress, and so most of the people here would be your constituents if you're elected. And the format is that I'm here really just to help facilitate an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to us, and then respond to some questions that people will submit to me in the chat. And once again, for the participants here, if you have a question you like particularly for me to address to the candidate, start from scratch and chat those to me. And Lily, you're welcome to spend up to the first half of this half hour just saying whatever you would like as an introduction to us, and then we'll address our questions to you.
Well, thank you for the invitation and meeting you online. I wish I could meet you in person someday. And especially if you are in my district, I go to, Southern New Hampshire quite a lot. I'm going there later today. I was there yesterday, did 4 events. And to briefly introduce my background, I was born in a communist China 2 years before Mao. I don't know how many of you studied Mao's Cultural Revolution. It's basically 10 years from 1966 to 1976. So I was 12 years old when he died. So I was born into poverty. My parents were illiterate and at the bottom of the food chain, workers class, and we lived on food rationing coupons, and we went to government schools every day for 6 days a week, and totally indoctrinated. And I was deprived of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and I really thought Mao was like a god because all the religions were demonized, and he called them cult. So that we were not allowed to declare any other gods or religion we're supposed to believe, even though I was raised as a Buddhist. My mother, my grandma were Buddhists. So when I finally wake up and little bit, 12 years old, when he died, I start questioning everything to say, somebody lied to me and he was a human being, he died. and I wanted to look for truth. And when the colleges reopened in China, after Mao's death, 1977, I was still in actually kind of like a middle school, last year of junior high. And I was determined I need to go to best university possible. And my parents always tell me, if you just had a good education, work hard, you will get a better job in China. And that's their only goal, to get a better job in China instead of like us working in the factories, had very little food rationing coupons and no positions and very little salaries, income. My parents were in debt all their lives. And so I went to the best university in Shanghai, one of the top 5, to study law, because I thought, you know what, we need a rule of law for China, for my motherland, and then we don't have to rely on rule of man. Because if you have a rule of man like Mao, 20 million people died during the Cultural Revolution. So when I studied in law school, I met an American student, exchange student, who introduced me to the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution. And he put individual liberty and the rights in my head. It's like I thought this was an awesome country. It's like my light bulb came on and could not turn off. So I said, if someday I have to leave China, this is the country I want to come. And the timing come after I become a faculty member in law school, and I feel the reality of total oppression, no academic freedom, no personal freedom. I was only 21 years old when I got my law school degree and got a faculty member job in the same law school. But I realized, the Communist Party, one-party dictatorship is not going to allow us to have a rule of law. I need to worry about my own future, my own freedom. So it took me 2 years really to study hard to pass my TOEFL exam, apply for American graduate school, got an American sponsor to sponsor me, sign the paperwork for me, and get the permission to quit my job to go to get my private passport as a graduate student. So 1988, 36 years ago in May, I finally, come to America and landed in Austin, Texas. And, with only $100 in my pocket and borrowed, and $1,200 in debt to my American sponsor. I could not speak English, but God has been so good. I met my husband the first night when I arrived in Austin, Texas. It's a destiny or it's a fate. And he helped me a lot to learn English, learn American culture. I had to struggle financially and also in graduate school. And I got my master's in actually School of Social Work. And the only reason I picked that school because my sponsor was next door neighbor to the dean of the social work dean school, and said they could waive me GRE because my English was pretty bad. I could not pass GRE. So I basically got my degree, got married, and have 3 wonderful children. 2 boys are veterans, and my daughter is in graduate school today. We lived in Colorado, and I started my own business after I got laid off by a telecommunication company in Colorado. And I got involved in politics 2008 because I noticed the country was changing. And I did not like some of those, terms and the rhetorics and the tactics. And I feel like, hey, I'm an American citizen. I need to pay attention what's going on. I cannot just keep my head in the sand, mind my own business. And I think as under Obama, I took my kids out of a public school, put them in charter school. I become charter school parents board member, chair, and I become a HOA board member. So I did lots of things to learn about grassroots democracy in my new country and practice my English too, to learn about American politics. And also I did run also against gun control in Colorado. It was like 11 years ago. And because in China, we were totally disarmed. And so people saw what happened in Tiananmen Square. And I learned about the Holocaust too after I came to this country. and I had to start from square one to learn about Holocaust and watch the movie Schindler's List, make me cry. And it's like, wow, how horrible was that? I did not know anything about it. And so when I finally got involved in political stuff, it's also in Colorado. And my husband and I saw what happened in Colorado. It's changing, and we wanted to embrace the New Hampshire live free or die state models and discover that New Hampshire is the only red state or purple state in New England. And I come here, visited 2016, and I said I just feel enough in 4 days. And I told my husband, when you can early retire, let's move to New Hampshire. And so finally, 2019, 5 years ago, just him and me, my daughter went to college. We packed up and drove 2 trips and moved to Ware. So that's where we live now, is Ware, New Hampshire. And I come here to immediately got involved in politics and rebooted the Ware GOP committee. And I ran for supervisor of checklist. And I started, funded and co-founded the Aging Americans Coalition, nonpartisan, a women's club, a social club, and Ware Pink is also nonpartisan. And I'm a charity and monthly donor to the food bank because I saw people really had issues during the pandemic and they needed help. And so I keep involved in our community. But for past 7 years, I have been speaking on the Speakers Bureau of Victim of Communism Memorial Foundation. And because I tell stories about me surviving a Mao's Cultural Revolution and communism, and young kids can learn from history. And I have been actually threatened by the Communist Party of China to say, we don't want you to come back to China. You will be wanted criminal. We want you to shut up. And I say, I'm an American citizen. I'm no longer Chinese citizen. I gave up my Chinese citizenship 30 years ago by becoming American citizen. They don't own me anymore. So I just basically ban them and tell them to take a hike, and I continue to do whatever I'm doing because I feel it's my duty as my American citizen to tell the truth and to point out how precious our country is, freedom is, and how fragile that is. And I'm heavily, my politics are rooted in my background that how I survived the communist China. I don't want this country going down the wrong path. And I see cultural Marxism today in our college campuses, and our kids don't know the history, and our government is getting so just intrusive and out of control spending, mortgage our children's future, and the border crisis. And so my slogan is, I'm running to save American dream. What brought me to this country? It's American ideals. What that means to me is freedom, peace, and prosperity, meritocracy, rule of law. And I see those are slipping away. And I have duty to come out, and regardless personal risk I take. And I have not seen my family in China for 9 years. I cannot go back. And I don't know what's going to hold in for me in the future. And I would like to go back to visit. But right now, I'm focused on my campaign. I did around 2022. I did not win the primary. So I'm now quitter. I said I'm going to run again and continue. And I have been campaigning for 16 months. That's why I had a victory for the primary September 10th and out of 13 candidates, because I've been running a grassroots campaign for a long time, for 3 years, it seems like. And so I tell people I'm very grateful. People voted for me, supported me. Only in America, only in New Hampshire, this is possible. Somebody like me who could come to this country, regardless my background and my English, my skin color, I can become the nominee for Congress, for one of the major parties in this country. This is a great country, and our American dream is really worth defending for and fighting for. And I truly believe a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I always tell people we might not agree on all the policies or every policies I stand for, but I will listen to you. I promise you, I will be honest. I will tell the truth. I will never lie to you. And I want to be that true voice and for the people in my district. Thank you.
Well, thank you for introducing yourself. And so I want to convey questions that are from the group, and any question that I wrote, I will identify as my particular question. And so I will start with one of mine. We have most, if not all, of the people who are here gathered today. It's just a week ago we were commemorating, I guess if you can call it that, the October 7th attacks and atrocities that were perpetrated by Hamas and others on Israel. And of course, continue in many ways, and we are tied very personally in so many different dimensions. A lot of us family dimensions and other kinds of things, and that is us as individuals and as a Jewish community. And we are also Americans, and I think we can say that in our American citizenship hats, we also, a lot of us, and I'll speak for myself, think about the many layers of the U.S.-Israel relationship and why that's important to us as Americans and in America. And we are, I think I speak for a lot of people, humanitarians, and wanting there to be an end to the wars, and for that end to be on a just basis for the people who we are connected to and for everyone. And what would you say are the roles that you would have as a congressperson in advancing particular policies or approaches, and how could you help to make that region better, and particularly make that region better for all of us as Americans?
Well, my heart goes out to the victims of October 7th attack that was so evil, and I condemned it immediately. And I wanted to always support Israel. I see Israel as the only democracy in the Middle East, only democratic ally we have as the United States of America. And Israel has a right to exist, has a right to defend itself. And I took some heat for that when I stand up. When Iran just a couple weeks ago, did that strikes, and I come out to say openly on X to say, we should stand with Israel and pray for Israel. And I know what's going on in China. I know that China is back Iran, and China is against Israel. After October 7th, they were putting down Israeli flags inside of China, and let the children, school kids, step on it. And so I bring unique perspective from outsider, somebody who was born, grew up in China, lived there for almost 24 years, who also lived in Hong Kong as expat, worked there for 2 years in international trade, and who speak Mandarin, and who can immediately know what's going on, at least when it comes to the PRC China. And I offer, nobody is like me right now in the U.S. Congress. And so I think I can really help the federal government, U.S. Congress, to deal with the war conflict in China. And I was shocked. I'm learning a lot about history of Middle East conflict. I was shocked to see after October 7th that immediately that the college campus students come out and support Hamas and chanting from river to the sea. I was interviewed by Fox News actually when I call out, what kind of people are on our college campuses? I saw even a college student dress up like a Palestinian, but when she took her mask off, it was a Chinese student who connect with China on the campus of one of those major universities protest in California. It's like they are trying to do this on our campuses, and they're recruiting also the communist-like-minded people by using so-called Free Palestine movement. It seems like there's a coordinated movement that at the beginning you talk about like a CRT, DEI, and then illegal immigrants, oppressed, migrants, and we need to help them, give them money, then to the free Palestine. But when you look closely, it's like a whole picture. There's a coordinated movement. Some might be even from outside the campus to go there. And so I think that I call this out. I say that we need to look at big picture, and we will try our best to stand with our allies and bring peace together. I supported President Trump's policies and his peaceful deals in Middle East, and to actually have the countries to, like his Abraham Accords, like 5 countries sign a deal. And I was not supporting Biden's nuclear Iran deal that just freed up billions of dollars to give back to the biggest terrorist country in the world. And then they can sell oil, unlimited oil to China, to other countries, get hundreds of billions of dollars to support terrorist groups like Hamas and some other countries. And so that I'm still learning. I don't pretend I know everything. That's why I'm very open-minded and to engage with groups like you. And I wanted to go to October 7th, actually the candle night, and then I got caught up with some longer interview. And I do have lots of Jewish friends in our state, even on my campaign as volunteers, and so that's where I stand. But my foreign policy is always peace through strength. If we do not project to the world, we are the strongest country in the world, not just economic power, but the diplomatic and military and also technologically. And they say absent, weak White House right now. That's why the world's on fire. And I know what happened, that I'm running against actually a wife of Jake Sullivan. And Jake Sullivan, as national security advisor, his foreign policies have got us into today's, troubles in the world. And it was horrible policies. And now this his wife all of a sudden moved back to New Hampshire a few months ago to run for this open seat, endorsed by Hillary Clinton. It's like why we need somebody from DC to run for the open seat. This belongs to the people in District 2, and they need to decide who they can trust to best representing them. But I'm totally outraged. She's got millions of dollars. So I have to work really hard to reach out to all the voters in my district.
So the role of a congressperson is like other political roles that you've had, and like being an activist, but also very different. You're one of very, very many, and requires so many of you to get together in order to get legislation passed or to accomplish something. So what do you think are the particular skills that do translate from your political experience so far, and what are the skills you have to develop new if you are elected?
And actually, I believe that to be truly representative, you need to act like a stateswoman, statesman, and we need to bring people together, even sometimes, cross the aisle from another side to get something done, good for our country, good for our people. And we don't need a lot of dramas, and we need a seasoned statesman, and we need to put our country first. So I have no problem. I go, I have lots of friends from all walks of life, including Democrats. I include people we disagree in my social clubs and our Aging American Coalition here. I just met 8 business leaders in aging communities, and hopefully they will host town hall for me. And I'm humbly listening to them. And as I said, I'm always accessible. And when I go to Congress, I want to engage the people from another side. We don't need to play politics unnecessarily. I actually believe in term limits. If people say that, hey, Lily is trustworthy, we want her serve us, and that's great. But if I don't represent people well, and you want to elect somebody else, I respect that. I respect people's choice. And I'm well liked by independent voters in my district because they feel like I'm just real deal. I'm sincere, and I will be transparent. and I will represent them with integrity. As I said, I will never lie to people, and I also will not be corrupted in DC. I heard DC it's a pretty, interesting place. And if you don't have very strong convictions, you could go there actually to become part of the swamp. And if we have, let's say, a different Democrat representing our state, I have no problem to work with them to serve New Hampshire. I run into actually Chris Pappas at the airport, and I shake hands with him. I even ask him, hey, how is it like to be congressman in DC? He said, it's frustrating sometimes. I say, I can say that. So I think that we just have to be respectful. And when you disagree with people and you always talk to them, you learn something, you hear them, and you disagree maybe respectfully. And but also that you're trying to sometimes, I tell people, DC is sometimes you do have to compromise to get something done. So you want to negotiate hard, for the best of country and your people in your district. But also you have to sometimes give and take and to negotiate, to pass bills. I understand all that. But of course, I'm still outsider. I don't know exactly how much details will be. So when I go there, I probably just have to go to conference, and Inez Stanfanic endorsed me, her EPAC endorsed me, and Maggie's list. So I have lots of people who endorse me, who know me, and I think those are people I will first kind of reach out, and if I do need some kind of insider advice and guidance and how to navigate the political process in Washington, D.C.
Do you think there are any changes needed in federal laws related to reproductive rights, to abortion, to contraception?
I have said that many times, regardless my opponent nice about me, this is state issue. And I don't like a federal government to dictate our Supreme Court justices. Maybe they took some personal risks, to be threatened and to give back to the state. It's very politically divisive issue. And our state is very different than some other states. And if we do trust the democratic government at the local level, then let's keep it as a state issue. I will not vote at the federal level. And I support New Hampshire current laws that they all Republican Party all support, to say we're not going to change anything. And I endorse Trump's position. It's a state issue. He took some heat for that. But we need to focus on, other more top issues that like inflation, economy, energy cost, and the border crisis. Those are the top two issues I hear people to tell me they're concerned with on my campaign trail. So I always say that I can be attacked by another side to lie about me on this issue. And I also stand with real women. I signed a pledge to say I am for women's rights. Look, I signed a pledge to protect women's sports and women's private spaces. And my opponent will talk about abortion issue all she wants, but she won't sign a pledge to defend the woman, to stand with women. And the Title IX, for example, now it's like a biological males can come in and get, win and play sports and they get scholarships. Our girls can be crushed on this issue. That's why in Bow High School, the parents all rise up and protested. And then they were marginalized to say, hey, you're not supposed to go watch a game anymore. Where that
question we're talking about, yeah. Medicare and Social Security, do you think that these need action in order to stabilize them fiscally? And what specifically do you think would be those changes? Or do you think it's okay as it is?
I said many times to the seniors that I will protect your Social Security and Medicare. You work hard for years and put money into it. I want our federal government stop looting the trust fund lockbox money. There's no lockbox money. It's gone. And we heavily rely on younger generation work hard, paying to Social Security in order to pay out the payment to current retirees. And because the government never keep their hands out of their jar, they are addicted to spend the money they should not touch. So I would like to say, if we want to really protect Social Security and stop looting that fund, and also stop giving that out to the people who not supposed to getting them. Like in some states, illegal immigrants, they cannot become the Social Security recipients and further dilute the community, the Social Security Trust Fund. And that's another issue I brought up on my campaign trail, that the money is gone and we are facing potential insolvency of those entitlement programs. And that's why I'm very fiscally conservative. I say that we need to stop the out of control deficit spending and get your hands out of some trust fund of Social Security and Medicare, and to protect them. And at the same time stimulate economic growth, job growth, so people can have more money to start business, feed their families, enjoying retirement, and bring down the inflation rate and cost of the everything. So our peace, prosperity will come back to us like 4 years ago. Instead, right now, really economic issue, bread butter issue is on the people's mind.
Well, Lily, Tang, Williams, thank you so much for spending this time with us. We hope that if you are elected to represent us, that we will be able to talk, and that you will have a relationship with the Jewish community, and that we will have a relationship with you. And I want to thank you for being here, and good luck in the rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having me. And if you have any questions, then go to my website, lilytangwilliams.com. And you can email me from there, follow me on social media, and check out my 9 positions on federal policies and my events and debates coming up. So I hope you will, keep in touch with our campaign.
Thank you. And in just a moment, I'm going to hand this back to Don Gorelick, our president. I want to say, just on my own behalf, to first of all, to everyone here, especially those of you hardy souls who stayed for the whole few hours, but really to Don and the Men's Club for continuing to be committed to this really important and valuable event. And I think that we all want to say our thank you to Paul Moverman for doing all the work to put this together, and especially knowing that we're doing this right after Yom Kippur and in this busy season. Just your own commitments to citizenship and being thoughtful voters are so important for all of us. And I think I will turn it over to back to Don.
Thank you, Rabbi. So I'd like to thank all of the candidates for this great discussion on so many important topics. And of course, thank you, Rabbi. Great moderation, as usual. We appreciate it. And please don't forget to thank our tech team, David Fox, Larry Rubin, and Paul Moverman. Paul, as you heard from the rabbi, spends so many hours contacting the candidates and arranging all aspects of this event. Special thanks to Paul. And don't forget our wonderful audience. Lots of good questions. Thankful to you, and very thoughtful questions. At this point, I think Paul's going to stop the recording.